Call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning. This is the American Rescue Plan Steering Committee meeting for Infrastructure and Facility Stormwater. It's April 22nd, a little past 10 o'clock. We're going to go start our agenda here. Today we have applicant presentations for the people that have applied and are in the queue for asking for ARPA funds. The agenda is laid out today as to how we're going to go. Some of these applicants have one or two asks in them, so we're going to hear these out, and then right after they get done presenting, if the board has any questions of them, to ask them, they can use that time to ask, and then we'll move on to the next one. So that's how we plan on going today. So then when we'd like for everybody to keep their presentations at least to 15 minutes, just in the spirit of trying to keep things moving on. If the Q&A takes a little bit longer, well then the Q&A takes a little bit longer. But we're just I think 15 minutes, if we could keep it to that. If there's extenuating circumstances, we can always talk, but we're going to be meeting a lot, and we can cover a lot of these items as we move through. So first one, any questions of the board before we get started?
Are we going to talk about the way our procedure, how we're going to handle it afterwards, or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, we will.
That's fine.
Yeah. So I'll maybe get into that a little bit right now. We have a meeting today, obviously. We have a meeting on Tuesday at 5 o'clock on Tuesday. And then we've also sent a placeholder meeting for May 2nd, which I believe is at 1.
Correct.
Correct, Madam Auditor? And on the May 2nd, so the next meeting on the 26th, we'll be hearing the next batch of presentations. So that meeting will be similar to this meeting. And then on the May 2nd meeting, I think, is when we're going to talk about the results of the presentations and how we're going to be doing some grading and doing some other things and talking about how we move what projects forward at that meeting. And then hopefully by the May 2nd meeting, if we don't run into any problems, we'll be getting ready to start presenting and shooting something off to the main committee. So that's our timeline right now. It could change a little bit, but for right now, I'm trying to handle it in this meeting, the next meeting, and then the May 2nd meeting, and hopefully we can get a lot of work done at that meeting.
Yep.
So any other good questions, Sylvia? Any others? Okay, first up, we have the Porter County Agricultural Society, and we got David. Yeah. David is here on behalf of the Porter County Agricultural Society. We have Marty Good. We have, come up here, Dave. You can sit down at the counter. We have some other people here from the Ag Society too. The president and some membership, and then Lori Daly from the Expo Center, who interacts with the Ag Society every day. So welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Good morning. And as Mr. Good said, my name is David Bagnall. I'm the manager at the Porter County Fair. With me today is Marty Good, who is the president of the Porter County Ag Society. Jay Gustafson, who is our electrical person that has had lots of experience with electrical. He's worked with the toll road and a lot of other electrical contracts around. And again, and Lori Daly, who is the manager of the Expo. Before I get started, I want to thank Mrs. Urbanik. She's done a phenomenal job. I've been to some of these meetings. A phenomenal job interpreting this ruling. And you know, we all know that when you start reading technical manuals, there's a lot of interpretation to it, and I think that she's done a great job. I'm sad to see that you're leaving county government, but anyway, I know that everybody has to move on with their life. In addition to that, you know, Mr. Good's been great, him and the rest of the commissioners have been great friends of the Porter County Ag Society and Porter County Fair, as well as the council with Mr. Jessen and Mrs. Graham. Mr. Novotny, I know you're doing a great job as an engineer for the County of Porter, and the legal counsel, Mr. McClure, great attorney. And I'm not very familiar with Mr. Hazard or Mr. Striedelmeyer, but I was at a meeting a week or so ago, and you two asked incredibly good questions. So I'm confident that this panel of people have all the right tools to move forward and make great decisions with this money. And I'm going to do a little prefacing here so that everybody can understand what the Porter County Ag Society does. And I'm sure that the council and the commissioners and the county attorney are familiar, but the Porter County Ag Society started in the year 1851 as a one-day event on the county courthouse. And from there was a couple other little locations, but it went to the 20 acres, which became 29 acres north of the Grand Trunk Railroad, which is now called Fairgrounds Park. And in 1985, we moved to the location out on Division and 49, commonly known today as the Porter County Expo and Fairgrounds. In 1985, so we've been in business 171 years, and we've been at that current location 37 years. Each year, we host a fair for a little over 1,000 individuals from Porter and surrounding counties for competitive exhibitions. And it's a great event, and it's probably the largest event in Porter County. We draw about 150,000 people annually to that event over 10 days. Annually, we did a little calculation, and annually the Porter County Expo and Fairgrounds draws about 250,000 people on an annual basis. So that includes weddings, that includes this weekend's garage sale, Shipshewana on the road, numerous events like that. The Porter County Ag Society is an integral part of Porter County government and Porter County, because in 1985, when we moved to that location, we built every building except the Expo and Expo East. At that time, we handed over the title deed to the county for those properties. But unlike some subdivisions or other entities that hand them over to the county, we continue to assume the costs. So since 1985, the Porter County Ag Society has invested over $4 million at the Porter County Expo and Fairgrounds. A huge savings to taxpayers. And our job, we have a memorandum of agreement with the county and a lease, and for the 10 days of the fair that we are able to be there. And our job is to maintain the buildings, make sure it's clean, safe, and well presented, and we do that. There's some other fairs out there that probably have similar situations, but they don't. This year we have a numerous amount of projects that we're going to do. We have a little heat issue in one building. We're going to put some roof vents in. We're always painting. A few years ago, we painted the buildings, or had them painted, which cost nearly $100,000. We have the things inspected, the grandstand, things like that. We have upgrades to blacktop. We add at blacktop and things of that nature. So I know that these funds are to be COVID related. The Porter County Expo and Fairgrounds was host to COVID testing and COVID vaccination during our last pandemic for over 2 years, and that was with the county health department and also the state strike force. The expo was host to a jury selection for a high-profile murder case that happened here in Porter County because COVID restrictions didn't allow them to do it at the courthouse, so they did it out at the Expo Center. The National Guard came out to provide a warming center for the nurses, and so they were out there and plugged into the electric, and so there's numerous things that have been COVID related that have happened out at the fairgrounds. So why are we here? We've been as I said, we've been there 37 years, and at Kankakee Valley REMC's suggestion, which is the electric provider for the grounds, our high voltage electrical system is at 37 years. And we've had a few faults, and according to all statistics and data, the electrical high voltage line is at end of life. And because I mentioned to you that we've had a few problems, as a matter of fact, there was a wedding that was to take place about a year or so ago, and there was a short in the high voltage system which took out all the power. And thankfully with Jay and the Kankakee Valley REMC, they came out and isolated the problem, and fortunately it was far enough downline that they could shut the transformer off and not and still have power to the expo so that the people could have their wedding reception. So there's 4 electrical phases to our proposal and 1 for a fencing proposal. And in a bit, I'm going to hand you out this brochure, which is basically summarizing my conversation, but I've chosen to hand it out at the end. So our phase 1 is electrical loop. And the way that the electric is laid out at the grounds, there's 2 legs to the electric. One comes in on the south side of the buildings, and the other one comes in on the north side, where it's commonly known as the food midway. And so those 2 are isolated. And the suggestion from REMC and Jay is to make them a loop, tie them together. And I think that's adding about 1,400 or 1,500 feet. So if there is a breach or fault, we can isolate the problem and shut the transformer off here and shut the transformer off here, and then backfeed the power so that we have very little outages. So that part of the proposal is approximately $150,000. Because I talked to you about end of life for the 4-aught cable that's directly buried, phase 2 is replacing the power on the south side of the barns, and that cable is buried at 3 feet. And from the research that I was able to do and have been told, that with freezing and thawing, it's really hard on that cable because it was direct buried, it wasn't put in a conduit. So our suggestion is to replace that cable, bury it at 6 feet to keep it away from any problems that may ever persist, and put it in a conduit so that in the future, if there's a problem, you can isolate the problem, pull it out, and resolve the issue. Phase 2, that's $150,000 as well. Phase 3 is on the north side of those buildings. Now that project is a little bit more because there's so much blacktop there that there'll be a fair amount of vacuuming, and it just costs more. The work is basically the same, but to vacuum out do the underground boring and do the vacuuming out and things is going to add about $50,000 to that phase of the project. And then when we get to phase 4, which is the generator for the Expo West, the Porter County Expo Center has a memorandum of understanding with NIPSCO, and it is a center in case there is a natural disaster, man-made or natural disaster, and it's a staging area for these disasters, and as well as it's probably one of the largest facilities in the county in case there are other situations. And so the suggestion is to put a generator in that building because it hosts training sessions and numerous other things. It's also the headquarters for the national elections. So could you imagine that, in a couple of years we get to vote for national election president and power goes out and people that are going to the expo wouldn't be able to get their vote in. So that phase is $125,000 to $170,000, and the reason that there's a spread there is because we don't know exactly what the air conditioning draw is. So when the weather gets better, if this is a favorable situation here, we will determine the draw and determine what size generator that fits fits that situation. And my final suggestion here is the fencing around the fairgrounds. The fencing is, again, 35 years old, and it's metal or galvanized, it was galvanized chain link fence. It's been repainted and repaired several times. Because of State Road 49 and the salt, it's very corrosive to that fencing, and it doesn't have a very good appeal, and it's been breached so many times that it's not a very good representation of what this county wants to exhibit, I believe. And then going down Division Road, part of it is woven wire fence, and that fence has been breached several times. As a matter of fact, it hasn't been that long ago that somebody cut the fence, went in and stole the county lawnmower. And that part of our proposal is $107,000. So I want to tell you that this that I'm going to hand to you has a recap of the conversations that I've just had. It has my notes that I've worked off of. It has an RFP, which we've come up with, that we will give to electrical contractors to quote this, and there's a map in the back and a quote for the fencing, and there's also a map in the back that outlines the electrical grid that we have here. And as far as that, I appreciate your time, and thank you for your consideration on our projects.
Any questions of David?
I understand that you have an RFP created that you plan to send out to get estimates together. Have you spoken to anybody as far as supply chain issues, like especially like the generator?
Jay can answer that question better, but I will speak to you on the fact that we did reach out to a couple people for budgetary prices as well, and the budgetary prices are within in the approximate range of our estimates here. Jay, do you want to answer the question about the generator?
Yes,
It's coming up.
The generator is about 6 to 8 months away. A lot of the other items like the box pads, the wire, and the conduit are within the 4 to 7 month range.
Okay.
That was of this morning.
Okay.
That
Could change.
is liable to change.
Right,
anytime.
right.
So,
Thank you.
With the generator itself, being that it is for staging area for natural disasters and things along those lines for elections, have you looked at other sources of funding, for example, like FEMA or another federal agency that may be able to provide you resources outside of ARPA?
We have not.
Okay.
Is there a generator out there now?
No, there is not.
Not one? No. Isn't that something?
And
By
it's,
putting the generator in, the building then becomes, from EMA, it becomes a warming center too.
Sure.
And right now, the county really doesn't have a facility that big that could handle in a catastrophe with something with a generator for that building. So, and I know when we were doing some testing and some other things out there, we had some really bad weather and had to shut down a couple days and power went out. So it was, it's something that I feel is much needed now. I think after we've gone through the pandemic and we've seen how much that building got used out there. I would also point out, David, that the 4-H building where we did a lot of the testing, that's not a county building. That's an Ag Society building, and we called them up and they just opened their doors. It had a heater in it.
Yes.
And so that's the type of relationship I think we have. And the other thing I'd like to point out real quick is a lot of this gets lost in government. People don't, pay attention sometimes as to some of the things that go on. But the Expo Center and the Ag Society, these are self-funded venues. I mean, the money that's made out there to pay salaries and to pay a lot of the expenses and everything, that's done by, that's done by weddings. And then the Ag Society, that's their one day where they have the revenue, the fair has the revenue. And I think it's important to understand that these are self-funded venues. So even though the county has the responsibility to keep facilities up to speed, a lot of times, a lot of the capital expenditures and other things, I think one could say that's why the Expo wasn't touched for 35 years until 3 years ago when we did its first renovation. And for those type of buildings, that's a little too long. And I think the infrastructure issue out there, and I've walked out there, I've been out there, it's dire. I mean, the plugins and things that are on the outside part are very dangerous. And I think it's time that, 35 years ago, a direct buried infrastructure. I think we're all up here that are in government see how 35 years of the county's work in the past is sort of not held up, or for whatever reason, building materials, whatever. It's just deteriorating very rapidly out there. And I think in your docket, I don't know if you've added pictures and stuff, but
I did not.
yeah, if you really want to see the shock and awe and see some of this stuff, it's all well documented, I guess, to say. So, and I just thought it was a good opportunity for the Ag Society, since it did help us a lot during COVID. The fair happened during COVID in the second year, and it was a good outdoor relief for a lot of people. And I think that's probably why they're here today. So I just tried to give you a little background of what's going on out there up until then. And remember, too, after we did the renovation, COVID hit. So now it's a self-funded venue, and it has no money coming in. And so I think you could also argue that they have a loss of revenue argument as well, too, here. But we really, we didn't put in for that. That could be a discussion for the $10 million, if we end up having $10 million for the county. That could be a discussion, too, for revenue replacement. But it's a little trickier revenue replacement for this one. I don't know, Vicki, you want to comment on that, or?
I would like
Go ahead, Sil, or whatever.
No, go ahead, Vicki.
First, is the Ag Society a 501c3?
We are,
So,
and we have a DUNS number.
yes, that's going to be a good question as we go further along. So they would, under the revenue replacement discussion, they could conceivably qualify for the grant to a nonprofit. This is, because it's a building project, that's why it's being
Right.
assigned to your subcommittee, so we can discuss where it's placed.
Yeah, I was just saying that there's multiple,
There's multiple.
right,
Yes.
that's all the point that I was trying to make. I
But
should
can
have
I
been a
ask a
little clearer.
question?
Yes, sure.
Mr. Bignan?
Yep.
Just to clarify, the fencing, the wiring improvements, and the generator, they would all be owned by the Ag Society, not the Expo, correct?
No, everything that,
In the
we
lease.
own nothing. We've,
All comes back to
we
us.
give when we built those buildings, we paid for them and we gave them back to the county. So, but unlike other places, we continue to maintain them, so.
Okay. Very good.
I will add that, I'm sorry, Mr.
No,
Graham.
go ahead.
I will add that the Ag Society is a volunteer organization. And there's one paid employee who is the fair manager. But during COVID, we did ask for assistance, and we got $20,000, which we used to pay for some maintenance repairs out there. And then we also tried to apply for a shuttered venue, because most of you know that we have some large concerts, and we tried to apply for shuttered venue funds, and we did not qualify for that, and so the only money we got was $20,000 for, and we used that for some maintenance things, which was to the benefit of everybody, the county, taxpayers, and whoever, so. Mrs. Graham.
Yeah, I would just like to comment that we had children that we grew up at the fairgrounds. We were my kids that were in the horse project. I think it is in dire straits. I agree with you, Commissioner Good, that I've spent a lot of time in those buildings out there, the 4-H buildings. It's a safety factor for the children and their parents, the animals. You go to plug in something, a lot of times they'll have a short. You have somebody on the grounds that'll fix it, but it's a lot of safety factor. And like Commissioner Good said, so many people go out to the fair, and it was a release for the people to go out the last 2 years that with the COVID, to be able to go out into open space and enjoy the fair as it goes on.
And we're proud of the fairgrounds, we're proud of the community that we're in, and it's amazing being out there, how many people come and say, wow, what a beautiful fair, this is the cleanest fair I've ever been to, this is nicer than the state fair. So it's just really, it's something that's really proud for us to be part of.
And as you should be. And, you know, I think there's no question as to the value of the relationship that you folks have had with the county over a long, long period of time, and with a history dating back to 1851? Is that what you said?
85.
51, yes.
1851.
Right here on the county courthouse lawn,
Right.
across the road.
And then fast forward a lot of years to, you know, a current history of 37 years out at the current site. And when you talk about a partnership and you talk about the $4 million that you as a society have put in to the property, I mean, that speaks volumes in terms of the contribution and the relationship and that partnership. The fair is arguably, I'm confident, the best fair in the state, if not one of the best throughout the country.
Thank you.
And I think the work that's been done out there, and that's 150,000 people over the course of the best 10 days of summer. The advertising works.
Yes.
And, you know, and then to talk about the 250,000 that go to the Expo Center over the course of a year. I mean, that's 250,000 people that are impacted by this particular property. And so, you know, and we can talk about how it, you know, how it relates to the ARPA funds and so forth, but it's, you know, a list of how it could and should fit into this funding. And that's, you know, the quality of life, the tourism, the loss of revenue, the, you know, the command center during COVID, which is really what it was, and for whatever emergency that we have, or whatever need we have in the future, we know based on that relationship that we have, that we have the cooperation that's needed to utilize that building for whatever the greater good is for, you know, for the county. So, you know, I think, you know, this county government over the last 7+ years, I can assure you, has been focused on infrastructure and taking care of the things that in many cases had been neglected for a long period of time. And I'd like to say that we've made good progress, and with all the progress we've made, we're clearly not done yet in terms of getting caught up to where we could or should be. And, you know, I think this particular project, based on how it's been outlined, seems like a great candidate to continue that infrastructure progress. And so I congratulate you.
And I don't know if I embellished this well enough, but you have a great ambassador out at the Expo Center. Lori Daly has worked hand in hand with us at the fair, and we have a great, you know, a give and take relationship, and we work really, really well together, and she's an asset to county government, so.
I would just like to point out one more thing. Again, I sort of alluded to it earlier, but, you know, I got here, 7.5 years ago. I was actually personally involved when I was in college. That was my summer job. I put a lot of the sewer and pipe in out there for contractors, so I'm pretty familiar with the grounds. But there was a period of time there in the county's history when Bethlehem Steel went down and Porter County took a huge tax increase. They took a huge tax decrease. I remember, and help me out because I'm going with what our Mr. Paparad has told me in my conversations with him when he was back there then. You know, the county just took a huge hit of revenue, and that lasted almost 20 years that it took them to work out of that. This was one of the areas that did not get any attention at all. And I know up until we did the expo 4 years ago, the Fair Board kept bringing stuff to us, painting the fence. We did, just the recent one was the new digital sign out there. That was a cost share agreement between us and actually it's not written in the agreement real specifically, but we just thought that we would just split the cost. So we've been doing a lot of that out there with the Ag Society, and I think when this opportunity came forward, we just thought they called and I said, well, just try to formalize it and put it forward and we'll see where get it in the meat grinder and see where it goes. So that's what we're here today for, so.
Thank you, everyone. Any more questions?
And I think you spoke to this, Mr. Bagnall, already, but the pricing that you have and that are in the proposal, seeing those are planning level or budget level numbers. Looking at the construction period, we do the load study, particularly for the generator during peak cooling season this summer, probably another 9 months out after that before you get to construction. How confident are you guys in these numbers? Are they adequate for what you want to do, what you need to do?
And that's, who knows what the future holds, but we've, it was our understanding that when we came in with a budget or price that was pretty firm. You can't have 53 people asking for money and then all of a sudden each one of them needs an extra $100,000 because it just doesn't work. So we had a Fair Board meeting last night, and it was one of the conversations that was brought up. And so we're relatively confident that we can hold to these numbers or very close to them. So.
Okay.
Is the quote for
And
the
you
fence?
can read between the lines on the rest of that statement if you want to.
Is the quote for
okay?
the fence budgetary as well? Because there's only one quote you had there. I just want to confirm.
I'm sorry?
The quote for the fence, I think I only saw one quote.
There are 2 quotes I own.
Okay, I only saw one, okay. Budgetary, or you feel like that's the final number as well?
They're within a few $1,000s, but we can, again, we can get 3 quotes, and that's our intention with the electrical bid, to get 3 quotes, and we can find another fencing contractor to, we just didn't want it to be an exercise in futility for people.
Is the expectation the work would be done, obviously, the generator would be probably a year or 2 out, but the electrical work, the phase, wiring, would that be planned for the summer, or would it be, when would it be timing for that?
We realize that we can't do it before fair, and we would want to, as soon as, if we got a go-ahead on it, that we would move forward on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I bring that up just for consideration by the subcommittee here, making sure that money asked for is going to be adequate to get the project done. And Mr. Bagnall hit on that. We don't want necessarily folks coming back saying, well, we're 300 grand short of what we need to do, and now we can't do the project. That'll put those funds in a pickle. So.
And that was the exact conversation that we addressed last night at the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and we were given that assurance that if we needed to help the project along somehow, that we have relative confidence that is not an issue.
Okay, great.
It's just working through the supply chain issues
Yes.
that are everywhere out there.
But, if electric all of a sudden triples and now this $800,000 project becomes $2.4 million, that might be a whole different story.
Right,
But,
right.
yeah.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you
All right.
very much. Thank you.
What would you, want me to pass these out?
Yeah, go ahead and pass them out. Thank you. Next up, we have the Porter County Coroner.
And I apologize, I only put one S on your name.
It's all right. Most people do.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is Kirk the 9th one?
Oh, you're fine.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to ask for these 2 proposals. The first proposal is for a Porter County morgue. And then the other proposal is for 2 new cargo vans that are needed. The COVID-19 pandemic has definitely impacted our office. Our office is on call 24 hours a day, 365 days per year. Unfortunately, we were not able to work remotely during this time. We had to put new procedures in place to keep the deputies safe because they still had to go on scene calls and enter homes to do a death investigation. The other way the COVID deaths impacted us was in the hospital. We share the morgue and a body cooler in Northwest Health Porter. Their space is 8 bodies. So when those spaces were filled, we had to come up with a different way to store ours. And excuse me when I say bodies, it's just coroner talk. The deaths, oh, I said that. And then the other way the COVID pandemic affected us was during that time, the council put in place restrictions for us to ask for additional appropriations, which I totally respected. So that sometimes was hard when we needed something, especially our vans, which would cost more money. What I did is I had the opportunity this past month to visit 2 different counties. The first county I visited was Howard County, and they have an approximate population of 83,000. They do 150 autopsies last year. Their facility was completed in 2021. They actually had office space that was renovated and did a build-out of their morgue and attached garage to their government building. They have a walk-in cooler with a maximum capacity of 26 bodies and a scissor lift. They have their fully functional autopsy suite with negative air pressure ventilation and all stainless steel equipment. And they have a secured property room and security cameras throughout. So I just gave you some pictures that I took of what their facility looks like. The other facility was in Marshall County. They're based in Plymouth. They are actually a population of around 46,000, and they did 20 autopsies last year. Their facility was completed in 2021, and they did a pole barn structure on government property next to their sheriff's department. It was, the size is 40 by 64. It was approximately $300,000 to erect this building, and they have a fully functional morgue with an inclusive garage. Their walk-in cooler has a capacity of 10 bodies and a scissor lift. They have a full functioning autopsy suite, negative air pressure ventilation, and they have their offices, a decedent viewing area, and the secured storage space with security cameras throughout their facility. So it goes from one extreme to the other, but it does what they need, and that's just 2 different ideas of how we could do this project. And then for Porter County, we have an approximate population of 174,000 people. We are one of the 10 largest counties in the state now, and we are sharing their morgue with a body cooler with a capacity of 8 bodies. They charge us, last year, we did 90 autopsies there. We get charged $225 per autopsy. The bodies are checked into the morgue with hospital security. All paperwork regarding the bodies is completed in the laboratory office. Just to be clear, none of this is really secure. The office, anybody can go in there and look at paperwork. and we are bound to the hospital's policies and procedures. The picture that I have is where we transport the bodies into that back door, and that is the employee entrance. There's no protection from the elements, as you can see. In 2020, Indiana Beverage donated 3 refrigerated trailers, and one of the trailers is the white one where the other orange arrow is. When the body cooler is full with hospital cases, we have had to use that trailer for coroner cases. And that's plugged in. We have an MOU with the hospital, so we can put that on the property, and that's plugged into the building for electrical supply. My office is comprised of 2 small office spaces, and we're pretty packed in there now. We're running out of room. Located here, next in this building, next to the health department. The time to go to the hospital to travel is about 10, 15 minutes, depending on traffic. And our storage area for our supplies is located in the basement of this building, along with all the various departments' supplies. There is a list from what I did was I took ideas from both of those facilities, Howard County and Marshall County. So I made a list, which is in your packet, of what I feel would make a very sufficient, effective county morgue. The prices that are listed are variable because there are many companies that these supplies and equipment can be ordered from, so it's just a rough idea of what it would cost. And we could even have just a 10 by 10 walk-in cooler, and that is would have a capacity for 12 bodies, which would be very sufficient for us. And then the other proposal is for the vans. Right now, that's a picture of the vans that I'm looking at. We've got 2 Ford cargo transport vans, which are parked in the county garage. They are not secured at all, except they're locked. So we have had a camera stolen out of one of the vans during the time I've been in office, so that was a little nerve-wracking. But as of right now, I think these 2 vans are a liability to the county because of their age and their condition. They're both rear-wheel drive, and they are very difficult to drive in inclement weather. Just this past February, we had 2 calls on the snowstorm day, and one of the calls was in Valparaiso, and it took my deputy an hour and a half to get to that scene. So I feel it's my duty to ensure the safety of the deputies traveling to and from a scene and the decedent being transported. Back in the end of 2019, I had sat down with some of the commissioners and Mr. McClure, and they recommended me to lease these vans from Enterprise Fleet. So I did get quotes back then, and then I just recently got new quotes. But then COVID hit, and I couldn't pursue that because of the restrictions on additional appropriations. So each van would cost approximately $53,000. They would need to be equipped with lighting, different equipment in the back, and I have those quotes from Bartronics and Link. And unfortunately, though, all these quotes are going to change. They already warned me of that. And these vans can also be purchased or leased, but maybe purchasing the vans outright could be the better option because we hardly put any miles on these vans. It's just age, so the new vans could last another 10 to 15 years for the department. So, do you have any questions?
Cindy, with the moored proposal, and if I missed it, I apologize, where are you suggesting that would be built?
I was going to leave it up to the county because I think there is county property available.
Where?
I'm not sure.
There's no county there's no county
County property.
available for this.
Okay.
As of right now, the way you've put the presentation together.
Okay,
So we don't I know for certain you can't put it in here. Can't put it in this building.
Right.
We know that.
I know that.
And there has been discussion in the past that there's a jail redo coming in the next 2 to 5 years, because the jail's 30 years old too now, and it needs a lot of upgrade, roofs, HVAC equipment, it's coming. And we had talked, 911 had moved out there. Is that a discussion that you have later with the entities to maybe you put a morgue out at the jail, because we'll have some additional space become available up there. And I think for offloading bodies and other things, it's a little more discreet out there. So I think that's what we had always been talking about doing. My question on the trailers that you have plugged in, are they still plugged in? Are we still using those trailers?
Yes.
Okay.
We have
All
the
three?
we have the two 11-foot trailers. We only have one of those on the hospital property.
One, okay.
And then the semi-trailer and the other 11-foot is stored at EMA.
Cindy, can you speak to the agreement with the hospital? What does that look like? That we lease from them, or there's a memorandum of understanding, or how does that agreement work?
I don't think it's a lease. It's just, ever since I've been in office, that's how it's been taken care of. I'm not sure
We
before.
brought the agreement in
my-
front of us and we approved it.
Well,
so you
but
should
not
know.
the 225. It was the, which one are you talking about?
The one you have in your proposal, you're talking about the two,
Yeah, I'm talking about just the arrangement with the hospital, where they charge us,
225 for an autopsy.
yeah. And
Yeah.
do they charge us for space rental as well, or do we pay them in
Not
advance based on
yet.
the agreement?
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet. And
I know I've been listening to the coroners talk about this for the last 7, 8 years. They all think that there's another shoe dropping with the storage fee. And it hasn't happened yet, but you never know, right?
yeah,
Do you have any idea of, I guess, I don't even know if this is a question as much as it was a statement and whether this is the appropriate time to bring it up. I guess one of my concerns right away would be, and I don't doubt for an instant that you probably need this facility based on what you're telling us. But one of our main priorities, at least that was given to us, was to not increase any costs for the county going forward. So I just question whether it is, even if we could do something like this, I don't know if that's within our realm, and then without having a site and without having any engineering or anything done. Again, I don't doubt that you need this, I just don't know if it's in our ability to do anything with it. And,
I just thought it would be if, with these funds, if they were available for this project, to have our offices, our morgue, garage, everything under one roof. It'd be more secure. The morgue that's at the hospital right now, many people that work there have access to it. It's just not the pathologists and the coroners. The nursing floors do. So I just thought this would be a more secure and safe building for
yeah.
the decedents.
You mentioned there were 90 autopsies done last year in 2021. Is that a normal number? Is it normally lower? What is, I mean, I don't like to hate talking with trends and deaths, but is it that, is it, you're sizing this built on 90 or sizing this built on a lower number of yearly autopsies done?
That was a high number last year.
Okay. So that's where you're comfortable with the space for the cooler for 10, I believe, or 10 by 10 cooler? 'cause you did-
Yeah,
okay.
I think that would benefit us. I don't think we would need any more than that.
And I don't, forgive my ignorance on this whole process, but are autopsies done as a result of a criminal investigation or an insurance situation? I guess what I'm asking, is there some sort of reimbursement back to the coroner's office for the autopsies that you do?
No.
Okay.
We don't have any income for the coroner's office.
Can I ask a question on the vans, I guess?
Sure, yeah.
So the vans, you mentioned one of the biggest issues you had is they're currently rear-wheel drive. Are you, I didn't know, are they four-wheel drive? Are they forward, front wheel?
The vans that we have now are the new ones would be all-wheel drive.
And they're designed for all weather then, obviously. And then this question might be as much for Vicki as anyone. I think Vicki, with these funds, technically you couldn't do them as a lease, could you? Because it would be the length of, or could you use them over, because of the time frame, the obligation, expenditure time frame?
I would think that it would have to be an acquisition.
I would think so too, yeah. Okay.
Because the project completion has to be 2026, at the end of 2026, so.
Thank you.
I could also say, though, that the vans could also be pushed out into the original government business, because it was something that was queued up prior to COVID, and we were going to lease them. And, but then when COVID hit and the supply chain broke down, I mean, we have the same problem in the highway department right now. We have the same problem in buildings, facilities. We have trucks that are been around for a long time and they're starting to wear out. We can't get them. And so it's been very frustrating. So you're not the only department that has been affected by this. It's affecting us in a lot of other departments. So that may be something that we could do again now that I think you can start ordering from Enterprise now again. I think that we just went through this on buildings, facilities, right? I think they open up for May.
Yeah, soon.
May.
The three different Ford, Dodge, and GM, I think it was roughly May, and then
June, July for
June,
one
and
of
then
them.
maybe August, and I can't remember which manufacturer was
Yep.
going to be start taking orders, but that was when we were dealing with the facilities issue.
Is the lease to purchase in that if you take one of these vans and you put all this equipment inside of them, do we turn around and turn that van back in 5 years and have to take all that equipment out and redo it, or is it basically just a yearly cost? And
So the way the Enterprise works is that it's fairly unique. First of all, the name Enterprise, it's not Enterprise down here.
Okay, okay, that's good.
That's the first big misleading issue, okay? We started this experiment after, I don't know, an 18-month, several years ago, going through it extensively. We started a process in planning stormwater, but essentially that when the market is working correctly, and the government gets their appropriate deductions for government purchasing through through our car manufacturers, we're able to purchase the vehicle through Enterprise, garner our reduction or our rebates, so to speak. Enterprise puts us on a monthly lease, okay? But at the same time, however we order that vehicle, we order it with everything that is needed. We try to have as little aftermarket things put on. We did this in facilities. We did do it in facilities. Next time around we will. But whether it's stormwater or plant, if the vehicle needed racks or four-wheel drive or whatever the case may be, we order it that way. Then Enterprise, we have our new car warranty. We started off and sometimes on a pickup truck, the government discounts in normal supply chains are, significant, maybe $10,000 or $15,000 discount. off the purchase price. We then hold it anywhere from 18 months to 36 months. Enterprise is in the background watching the used car market. They all know the mileage, all the GPS comes with it, so when that vehicle becomes at its highest aftermarket rate, it gets then turned back in, it's replaced. The few times we've had this happen, because we did it as a small experiment, first planning and stormwater, when those vehicles get sold, the first couple actually resulted in a profit that then rolled into the next vehicle. And so the reason that that's been working so well, and that's why we've been pushing departments to do it, is one, it's more budgetable. Mr. Justin will know from being on the council that we were on a cycle of whenever we had a capital purchase, you know, it's difficult in government budgeting to be able to absorb. In 2018, you need $50,000 for a vehicle, but you don't need that capital again until 2022, and then it's a surprise, I need $75,000 for a new vehicle. This allows them to have a line item within their budget that's paying a monthly fee that's expected, that we know, it's predictable, so it's easier to budget, but it takes us out of the up and down roller coaster of we have brand new stuff, and then at some point everything's falling apart and we have to start back over. So it really works, whether it's from the budgetary standpoint or from the department itself or from a pure financial standpoint. It's really checked all the boxes. And so the first big is that we're not driving down the road and going to Enterprise and, you know, buying a corner van. It's the same name, which causes confusion. But that's kind of the whole scenario.
I understand the stabilization of expense. I mean, that's something I've dealt with myself. But I guess my question would be the equipment that's third party. Do we have to repurchase that in 3 years if that's when the van comes up?
If we actually got the vehicle and put third-party materials on it, we would take those off before we turned it back in and put it on the next one.
Right.
Okay, that was my concern, was
But for
consistent
most
paying
of
for those
it,
costs.
unless we get into a really specialized situation, that we might have maybe hit an animal control van, but beyond the that whatever's available, we can normally get when we order the vehicle. Even because what we can do is, even if it's aftermarket, it goes from Enterprise to aftermarket, whether it's decals, lights, whatever the case may be, before we get it. All of that's rolled into that price. But whatever can be removed from the vehicle to the next vehicle is.
We can do, okay. Yeah, thank you.
One of my concerns is, Cindy, I think you're aware of this, in budgeting, is we have this money and we're going to be able to do great things in the county with this. But it's whether or not it's going to be sustainable. And that, it gives me some concern about the morgue specifically. The vehicles that could be leased, or whatever way you want to do it. And that's but that concerns me about how that would fit in with the budget. And you're very familiar with coming before the council, the budget process. And that would be my only concern.
Yeah. I'm trying to be proactive here because from talking with the other coroners, there are more and more hospitals that are cutting their ties with the coroner's office.
I can appreciate that.
And that concerns me a little bit. It concerns me that at any time they could start charging us to just use the body cooler. I've tried to work with the hospital and negotiate with them, with our costs, like using the lab, x-rays, CAT scans, that sort of thing.
Have you talked to President Rivas, Council President Rivas, about any of this, about your concerns here with this?
No. Mm-mm.
Is there, my last question, Cindy, is, and if you don't know, no problem, but so throughout the state of Indiana, do most counties have a physical morgue, or do most counties have some relationship with a hospital? Percentage?
Most of the counties now are building their own morgue.
Remember, again, folks, this is a lapse over of the, 10, 12 years ago, we sold the county hospital. and the county owned that facility. So back then, sharing stuff with county government and the morgue, and then all of the employees that went to, remember, we're one of the largest employers in the county too. So, and we have a big agreement with Northwest on an ambulance contract too. So we have some, I guess the word is hushva, with regards to a little bit of being a client, I guess, so to speak, of theirs. But I think this is, when we moved away from the insurance and the story we did 8 years ago, when we moved away from that, and because the insurance was always handled the same way, because we owned the hospital. And so it was sort of all like kind. There was a lot of reaching across the aisle and a lot of cooperation because the county owned the asset. Now that it's been sold, it's taken us over 10 years to start decoupling all these things and get them more into a third-party type situation, or we take it over. I actually feel that this is the direction that the county should go in. I just question the timing right now from my perspective, because we really don't have a place to put it. But I think that I do believe, Cindy, that in the healthcare committee, or the health department COVID committee, there is something in there for redoing of the space for the health department, your office, and the Veterans Affairs. So we thought we could at least get you some storage and additional office in the short term. And what I had thought, and I'm not going to be around, but what I had thought, and I know that the jail is something that is on the docket. I know the lease, the bond is up next year, or the following year, is it?
Last payment is January 2024, but we always pay this in December, so it's going to be 2023.
So the bond will be paid off.
It's completely
And then
paid
the
off.
council, in their wisdom, about a year and a half ago or so, I lose track of time because of COVID, but we studied this, the loss of the bond, and actually I think our consultants basically told us is that we need to at least we need to go back and bond another $18 million. This is what's so funny about this stuff. You're all going to go, what? But to have that $18 million bond, that's going to keep our tax rate down.
Exactly.
I don't understand the algorithms and how all that works. That's a Vicky deal. But that was the outcome of that. I remember Mike and the council telling us that. So, we have the ability to go do that to the jail, and it's not going to be a huge cost. It won't affect our taxes. It will make them go down, which is good. So I think that'll be determined on the new leadership going forward. Is that going to be the time to do that? And I think at the time, I think that's when, because we have a study coming from Skillman that they're going to be presenting, I would think, soon on the condition of the jail. And this is all going to be made public with 911 moving out. There's also been a space assessment done in there. I know the sheriff is wanting to spread out a little bit in there, but we own the building. And we want to make sure that we do everything right and we take care of places that, like yours, that are sort of busting at the seams. So I think, to me, that's something that I think is right around the corner. But again, that would be up to the new leadership. I'm not going to speak for them, but I know just doing all the homework and the stuff that'll be rolling out over the next several months, I think it'll paint a picture that there's some work that needs to be done out there, and I think we have some opportunities to take. And for me, unloading bodies and doing that type of stuff out there, it almost seems like it would be better
Better fit.
out there.
We
And we don't
saw
have to
the
buy
picture.
ground, we don't have to build a new building. It's just tenant finish now, so now it becomes less expensive, right? And we have to still put new HVAC, new roof, but that's the bones of a 35-year-old building that you have to do anyway. So I'm just sharing to the group and to the public the discussions that we have had over the time, and those discussions go back and forth a lot. Sometimes we think we're going to get there a little quicker, and then we get knocked off and something happens and we have to pay for something else or do something else, and that's sort of been the way it is around here. But I just wanted to give a little time capsule of some of the conversations that we've had. Scott, I know you were involved in a lot of those meetings, and Did I miscategorize anything? I know you've been involved in some of the discussions.
Yeah, right now, we're just waiting for the jail assessment, and we've had a few things in the hopper that have probably taken our attention away from the bond, but it's still not upon us yet. And that's the money that would be needed to refresh the building at the jail. Obviously, we know there's, from a facility standpoint, it's kind of an endless abyss right now of fix, but it's an older building, and obviously it's got a significant amount of heavy use being done to it with the individuals that are residing within it. So.
And I'd also point out, too, to the group that over the last several months, we've had a lot of, this winter was very, very tough on our road inventory and our buildings because of the weather, the freeze-thaw cycles that we have. It was very destructive this year. And we're starting to see some remnants of some problems starting to pop itself up out at the juvenile detention center, too. And we're starting to think, well, maybe we should maybe study that, too, before we go do the jail thing, and maybe we kill two birds with one stone and get one bond. I don't think it's going to take a lot of money over there, but it's big infrastructure things that are really starting to fail over there. A lot of that has to do with the design of the building, but that was 22 years ago when another commissioner was here. So that, you know, that's what we got to take a look at. So that, I just want to let you know that's something coming up on the docket. You got bonding capacity there, and so I'm just sort of throwing a little into the wind here, looking forward. So
Yeah.
It's good
I'll quit
information.
talking.
Good ideas, excellent
Yeah,
ideas.
right. Here, I'll put it over here so you can. Any other questions of Cindy? We'll get moving on here.
No, I think a good presentation, Cindy. I think a necessary building.
It's a need.
Yep, it's not a want.
From where I sit though, yeah, not having a site, not having design going already, I think it'd be difficult to get a project done by the time, right, we've got to be under contract by the end of 2024.
Well, actually, the steering committee just, and I should have mentioned this, the steering committee is urging all, no, not urging, is requiring all subcommittees to ensure that any of the projects that need to be obligated, not just like outright spent, that they need to be obligated by mid-2024.
By mid-2024,
July 1st,
okay.
2024, to allow the county government more time to
Sure.
analyze what it might need to do with that remaining funds if there's any left.
That makes sense.
But good luck getting a pole, I'm working on a pole barn project in Valpo right now. Good luck getting a
Getting a
price
pole,
out of
yeah.
them, because they're holding everything close.
Yep.
They're like, we're not gonna, are you gonna really go?
Yeah,
And
it's
then
hard
they'll get- You probably knew that, checking around. I mean, they're like, we're not, because lumber is taking $300 swings every day in the market. I mean, you can't, it's like, you know, it's not throwing darts. It's volatile out there right now, and hopefully it'll settle down. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Cindy.
Thanks, Cindy.
And to talk a little bit more about this, it is very important. This committee, I think, has a lot of this issue. I think the not-for-profit committee has this issue that they're going to have to address. But that July 1st, 2024 obligation date is a big deal because, and the reason why it got backed up is if we fall off the cliff December 31st of 2024, the money gets returned to the Treasury Department. So when the Central Committee was having the discussion, the concern was, it's not that anybody wants to artificially change this date, but the July 1st date was the idea was, if the project got through, it was funded, July 1st, 2024 comes around, there's probably gonna have to be a review, a meeting, bring everybody in,
Yeah,
where
there's
are
a
you
buffer
at?
there, yep.
If somebody's on the precipice of finishing it, threading that needle, they're gonna be done by September 1st, or whatever the case may be, okay, fine, and then there's a MISE on it to make sure that happens. But if in the case, somebody's awarded money and it becomes clear July 1st, there isn't really gonna be an opportunity for that to come all the way done. It gives the county government 6 months, give or take, to figure out another
Makes
place,
sense.
because all the same requirements for whatever next would be are there. So you can't allow, when that's the consequence, you know, the Central Committee didn't want to find ourselves in a situation in a November or a December in this building, trying to figure out how to spend somewhere between $10,000 and $5 million in a way that doesn't get returned to the Treasury. So that's why that date's so important, and I think as your projects come through, that will be one of the major issues and hurdles to get through.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're going to do a little change in the agenda here. I talked with Mike. We're going to move Shirley Hines up so they don't have to sit through all of our stormwater stuff. We'll just move you up on the agenda, Chris. Come on forward and give your presentation.
Very kind, Mike.
I'll do that for you, Chris.
Although the stormwater will be riveting.
It will if you've seen me talk about stormwater.
I'll try to make this slightly more riveting. Well, thank you, everyone, for having me here today. My name's Chris Kraus. I'm the Executive Director of Shirley Hines Land Trust. I've been in that role since 2005, and we're here to talk to you about the conservation and restoration of the East Branch of the Little Calumet River Corridor. Next slide. So just for those of you that might not be aware, Shirley Hines Land Trust got started in 1981. We just celebrated our 40th anniversary last year. We have a mission of preserving and restoring natural lands and waters in northwestern Indiana, actually. It's a 6-county geography. We're headquartered here in Porter County, where we have protected over 1,000 acres. So of the 2,700 acres we've permanently protected, a big chunk is here in this county. We do have a mission of engaging people in conservation and nature. That's something that has become more and more important to the organization over the years. We have 6 state-dedicated nature preserves. This is the highest form of protection in the state of Indiana, and it's where the most rarest and ecologically significant natural areas they get that designation. One thing we're very proud of is that in 2018, Shirley Hines received the Staff National Excellence Award from Land Trust Alliance, which is the accreditation body for it's like about 1,300 nonprofit land trusts in the United States. Next slide. So just to put the project that we're here today to talk to you about in context, you can see this pretty blue map here. And it really was developed after we acquired a 42-acre parcel across the street from Brummett Elementary in the town of Chesterton. That property was acquired in 2010, and then an opportunity came up in 2014 with the state of Indiana with their Bicentennial Nature Trust funding program to have a couple of key corridors in the state of Indiana designated with allocated funds for land acquisition. We presented this map, and it ultimately resulted in $1 million of funding for land protection, specifically on this river corridor. The red pins, if you will, are properties that are currently owned by Shirley Hines Land Trust and managed. The corridor stretches from the headwaters at Red Mill County Park in LaPorte and goes all the way to Portage Lakefront Park. Our focus has been between Heron Rookery in Porter County to Shellberg Farm, which is essentially kind of a central hub in the Indiana Dunes National Park. Next slide. So you fast forward to 2022. These are some of the things that we're very proud of that we've accomplished. We've gone from 42 acres to 520 acres of land, mostly floodplain forest and natural land along the corridor. We have a and we are very intentional about restoration and land management of all the properties we protect. And so there have been some significant and large-scale restoration projects over the years on that corridor. We Recently, just within the last 3 years, have kind of started working on an ag and water quality program, and that has been very exciting for us. We've been partnering with the county, specifically the Porter County Soil and Water Conservation District, the NRCS office, and farmers. So we do have a vision of really being a resource for farmers, helping them put best management practices on their land, and even to the extent possible or appropriate, if there's a need, helping them explore ways that they can keep their land in agriculture, which ties into this project as well. From a tourism and recreation standpoint, we've created 5 miles of water trails and also 5 miles of hiking trails on those 520 acres we've permanently protected. I say all of this representing Shirley Hines Land Trust, but it's all about partnerships. We have had so many amazing partners: Indiana Dunes National Park, DNR, several departments within the county, Save the Dunes. There's a whole slew of conservation entities that are, it's kind of this bi-state initiative, the Calumet Land Conservation Partnership, that have all really been instrumental in making this happen. So it goes without saying, and everything we do at Shirley Hines is partnership focused. So focusing in on the 67 acres, we are requesting or asking for funds to protect as a part of our project is outlined in red, and you can see how that correlates with the larger watershed. And on that key there, you can get a little sense of the different landowners within the corridor and even beyond. The next slide. So if you look at this map, this is a zoomed-in version of the kind of Heron Rookery, Reynolds Creek, DNR area, and Shirley Hines' Dale B. Enquist Nature Preserve property that we were able to protect several years ago and do some large-scale restoration. Also, more recently, some innovative best management practices, including cover crops, partnering with the Porter County SWCD. It just so happens that we have done a lot of conservation planning in this area, and we are excited about this opportunity to partner with the county on protecting the 67 acres you can see outlined in red there. We have a willing seller, and you saw the dollar amount of the request in the proposal. If you go to the next slide. This gets into kind of the stormwater management and infrastructure side. I'm looking at Mike because he's much more articulate and knowledgeable about what the potential stormwater benefits are. That's something that's a little bit of a new realm for Shirley Hines. We are learning a lot, but the obvious things that the protection of this property will allow us to do is improve stormwater and drainage function of the property, and also that whole lateral, it's referred to as lateral number 18 ditch of the East Branch of the Little Calumet River. And so wetland function, flood storage, things like reducing nutrient and sediment loading, that's all things that will improve water quality of this river corridor and ultimately Lake Michigan. So we're really excited about that. Agriculture best management practices will be something that we can implement and deploy on this property. So I mentioned farmers earlier. This is a way for us to promote best management practices and also have demonstration opportunities with the farm community. So we're excited about that. It goes without saying, we'll restore. There is a portion of natural area on the property. We'll definitely be doing that. We have Eric Bird, our stewardship director here. He manages a team of 4 full-time employees that focus on managing our properties. We also have interns that will be working with us this summer on water quality sampling or water sampling, and we're also doing some things in partnership with the IU Climate Fellows program this year, developing some climate resiliency models for this watershed. Next slide. So one of the things in attending several of these meetings that has come up is it, and you have all been talking about it, kind of that, the timeline of projects and viability. And I think one of the things that we can tout at Shirley Hines is we have been highly successful with land acquisition and restoration projects. So we're confident we can implement this project, and we have the staff capacity to do so. We'll be partnering closely with the Porter County Department of Development and Stormwater Management on this property and or project. And we do believe that not only does it allow us to continue growing partnerships for this critical, and I would say largest conservation initiative in the county. These are lands that are permanently protected for county residents to enjoy long after all of us are gone. So, timing, I mentioned the willing seller. We believe that we can execute on acquiring this property within 6 months of getting county approval. And also just want to note some of the other support. We do have some restricted funds available to support the stormwater infrastructure and improvement projects at this site and adjoining properties. So that's something for the subcommittee to be aware of. And Mike, is he's developing his plans for stormwater improvements in this area. And just, it's all about leveraging partnerships and resources and non-county dollars that have made this project area happen. We've had over $1 million just in that Heron Rookery, Dale B. Enquist Nature Preserve area that we have brought to the county for acquisition and restoration. And then if you zoom out, if we were to go back to the pretty blue map that was up there, that we've brought over $3 million since 2010 to the area to advance this initiative. So that's, and then we do have one slide just talking about COVID and that economic response and impact. We are very fortunate. We didn't have any major financial hardship as an organization. We did have some staffing transitions and challenges that we had to navigate. We were grateful to receive 2 PPP loans that helped us on the operations side. And ultimately, I think 2 kind of environmental or conservation related things that we saw is, there were limitations in terms of being able to deliver programming, but we also saw kind of an unintended consequence of our preserves, particularly some of our nature preserves along the East Branch of the Little Calumet River Corridor and our Meadowbrook Nature Preserve, which is near Sunset, a significant influx in visitation. So that's something that we're working through as an organization. It's exciting, but it also does present challenges. And so that's kind of the gist of it. I'd just like to, take questions, obviously.
Yeah, any questions of Chris? Chris, what, this work, is there a storage capacity for water that's also going to benefit from this as well, too?
Yeah, I think that's where I would defer a little bit more to Mike. So we don't have specific gallons, right. And I think from an acreage standpoint and some of the work that we're doing adjacent to this property, just to the east and south, I think will play into this project really, really well in terms of creating that upland or upstream flood storage that's really going to benefit the town of Chesterton and the town of Porter.
Because we're always looking at upstream and downstream. How does it impact flooding? How does it impact water quality, water in general? Mm-hmm. What do you call it? The level of water down in the ground, what do you call it? Water table, yeah. Geez, thank you. That took me a while. But water table is always, we're going to be talking about that a little bit later and on another project of those type of things. So, being in stormwater, one of the commissioners and stuff, it's storage capacity is, we're always looking for it upstream, downstream,
Yes.
because that's gonna improve the residents, the people, the residents that are up or down, and that's the key takeaways in stormwater. You're always trying to make it better than what was there before, but you look to the people upstream and downstream. So, Mike, I'll defer to you, because I'm on the edge of the board on engineering stuff now, so.
You've hit the essence of it.
Yeah.
So the exciting thing and I don't, unfortunately, I don't get to work on a lot of things that necessarily excite me. It's
Yeah.
things we have to do and have to fix, but this is an exciting project in that this is an outgrowth of several years of conversation, partnership development that we've had with Shirley Hines at the department, with the National Park Service, with the idea of trying to turn this corridor, and in particular this area, into sort of a wetland storage area of regional significance. So we're not talking about a 1 acre mitigation wetland here, or 2 acres there, but significant in terms of really going back to what maybe it was before these lands were drained and improved for agricultural purposes. So this particular parcel, this particular acquisition, as Chris mentioned, our Kemper Ditch, Arm 18, runs through this property. It's in need of reconstruction. It's an old drain tile that was put in by the CCC in the 30s, with a lack of maintenance for the last 100 years, essentially. The stream is kind of restoring itself. So either, if Shirley Hines is able to acquire this parcel, we will be able to reconstruct that arm in a way that restores the stream, that reconnects the stream with its floodplain, that adds a significant amount of floodplain storage, water quality improvement, and other ecosystem services, things that stormwater can do, but we don't often talk about, things like carbon sequestration, wet meadows and mesic prairies, hold a significant amount of carbon. And when we look to the future and climate change challenges that our society is going to face, adding these resources where we can in the landscape makes a lot of sense. So Shirley Hines acquisition of this property would allow us to do that. If they're not, it stays in agriculture, we're going to have to reconstruct it, but it's going to be just a storm sewer. It's just going to be a drain tile.
Who owns the deed of the property once it's purchased? Is that still Shirley Hines, or is that
Shirley
the county?
Hines Land Trust.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep, and I think that's one of the benefits to this project is that of course, there's the partnership with the Stormwater Management Department, but it's not, I think, long-term, we're taking on that responsibility, and it's not a need for the taxpayers to continue contributing to this project. We'll take on that responsibility.
And from the county's perspective, having a partner like that can take on these type of products, get a benefit from it, but yet not have the expertise here like these gentlemen have in getting into these protected lands to maintain them the right way, they're going to get a lot more attention. I think what I know from my perspective, being in charge of the stormwater department, I'm looking at capacity. We're trying to buy capacity everywhere we can out there. That makes sense on a cost per dollar basis. And I think that's, because we have these problems all over the county. It's everywhere. It gets a little dicier as you get closer to the lake, in the wetlands and all the things that are going on up there too, so.
Long-term needs to be publicly accessible for paths and.
Yep.
Then they
Yeah,
program
it ties in. We already have some trails out there on the Dale B. Enquist Nature Preserve, but we'll definitely be able to create more paths and trails in conjunction with
Which is
this.
also exciting from where I sit, meeting our MS4 program requirements where we've got to provide public education and outreach, having partners like Chris and the Shirley Hines Land Trust allows us to meet those goals without having to spend additional county resources recreating the wheel when already exists.
We've talked about some kayak launches and stuff before too, right, with your group? That was several
Yeah.
years ago.
Yep,
That was over by Brummett.
Yeah, we
wasn't it?
have a kayak launch at Brummett, right across from the elementary school. And we're also working with the county because the bridge being
That being-
restored there, we're going
We're doing a
to-
lot over in that area right now.
Yeah, so we will be collaborating and, kind of modifying the exact location of that kayak launch. And then there's also one in the town of Chesterton at our Walner Nature Preserve right across from St. Pat's.
You can take a kayak.
It's really amazing, and that's an amenity this county really didn't have. And, the Northwest Indiana Paddling Association, I should have mentioned them
Yeah.
earlier, is a key partner that really has made a lot of that happen as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right, thanks. And I have a couple
Thank you.
preserve guides and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. On page 33 is more about
Appreciate it.
East
Thank you.
Branch.
Thanks, Chris. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the great work you're doing.
National parks, I didn't even know.
We actually go to these, my family and I will go to Shirley Heights processes.
We go to parks all the time, I just didn't even know about this.
They're at Hidden.
Yeah.
Let me know if you need more, too.
Okay, thank you.
It's a little
Yeah.
fact. I can
They're the deal.
And I love the fact using natural ways to control
Now we go straight.
instead of man-made.
Yeah, for sure. We're getting really close to having it all out to this.
Okay, next up, we got our stormwater projects for Porter County. We got Mike Novotny here, the county engineer, that's going to go through these projects. And
I'm gonna go through this relatively quickly, but there are a lot of projects here lumped into this.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna try and hit on the key aspects of each of them.
No, boy.
And I'll particularly move through the upfront stuff relatively quickly, but because the council members and Jeff is obviously familiar with what we are capable of, but what I wanted to show as I get started is. Yeah, can you guys hear?
Yeah. Tap here, see if it's on.
It's on.
Raise it up just a little bit.
Hello, I'll talk right into it.
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. I'll do my best. Kurt, if you would. Our stormwater program, and these are small words, but you don't have to read them all. We coordinate activities, administer programs, and implement projects across unincorporated county, Porter County, to provide drainage, improve water quality, reduce flood damages, and maintain and enhance the county's valuable stormwater infrastructure. And all of those services that infrastructure provides. It's not just conveyance and drainage, but as we talked about with the last presentation, it's also things like flood control. It's also water quality improvements. It's also ecosystem services. We serve an area of 340 square miles, the entire area of unincorporated Porter County.
it's all in white.
It's all in white. Anything that's not in gray or blue or red. Population, we serve 74,000 people plus or minus in our unincorporated Porter County. A couple of major watersheds like Michigan and the Kankakee River. We are responsible for over 500 miles of linear stormwater infrastructure, so ditches, storm sewers, drain tiles, and about 2,000 miles of roadside ditches and transportation-related infrastructure. We also have about 150 or so detention basins across the county. Our efforts are funded by the stormwater user fee, which everybody in unincorporated Porter County pays into. Single-family homeowner generally pays $120 a year into our effort. The commissioners years ago, council years ago, made the step forward to put this user fee in place. And what it's done is provided a fair, equitable, transparent, and dependable source of funding for caring for our stormwater infrastructure that the county never had before. And I can speak to the decades of neglect and lack of oversight on that infrastructure that we're now going back and performing triage on. But that being said, we have about $3.8 million a year that the user fee generates. we are able to put 2/3 of that back into our infrastructure. The rest supports, our infrastructure upstairs, our staff. But I'm pretty proud of that fact that we are able to put so much of that user fee back into the infrastructure itself. We're left with about $1 million a year.
Mike, you might want
Yeah.
to talk about, just throw in there, maybe it's later on, but the river basin and the fee that we got.
Sure, I can
that's-
speak to that right now,
Okay.
because I think that's right on topic here.
Right.
We're left with about $1 million a year to go out into the community and do construction, maintenance, repair projects. That's getting whittled away. We are now part of the new Kankakee River Basin, Yellow River Basin Development Commission. The county is making a direct payment per state statute to that commission, and that's about $200,000 a year that comes directly out of our stormwater user fee. It saves the taxpayers. They're already paying that fee. It saves the taxpayers from paying that again, and it saves us in whole 10% on what we would pay if we weren't making that direct payment. And that organization, I sit on the board, that organization has done a lot in the last couple years since its inception to begin working on the Kankakee River, which also is in a state of decades of neglect and needs a lot of attention. So I'm happy about the efforts that are being made there, but the point being that we're left with a relatively small amount of money for what is a significant amount of work, 340 square miles and over 500 miles of infrastructure and 150 storage areas across the county. Is not a whole lot when you have to go back and basically rebuild subdivisions from the ground up. Kurt? We'll skip through these real quick. I just wanted to reflect back, 2018, 120 projects, contract value of more than $5.1 million. 2019, $5 million worth of projects, 108 projects in total. 2020, 150 projects with a contract value of more than $10 million. 2021, 85 projects with worth over $1.7 million in construction contract value. We have a lot of project information up on our website, so people can go and get at least basic information about where we're working, what we've done, and what we plan to do. I share this information with you because I think one of the things the committee should consider is capability of the entity to get the work done. And I think what we've shown since we started our efforts in 2016 by completing more than 580 projects and investing over $23.5 million back into our infrastructure to address problems, complaints, concerns, and make improvements across the county, I think we've shown that. When we consider problems and projects across the county, these are the criteria that we generally use to evaluate and rank those problems and projects and put them at the top of the list. The projects that I'm presenting to you today were fed through this analysis procedure and were determined for that reason to be high priority or urgent projects because we've got cars falling into sinkholes where storm sewers are collapsing. And I share these with you, maybe as the committee moves forward here in our own selection process, considering a similar suite of criteria sort of to evaluate and rank the projects that the committee's considering. That snuck in there. It's supposed to be on this slide. So Old South Haven, so this is just a reflection back again on work we've done. Old South Haven subdivision was identified as the top priority using those evaluation criteria. Subdivision that was built in the early 1960s using corrugated metal pipe that has a lifespan of between 20 to 40 years at best. At this point, we've pretty much rebuilt all of the stormwater infrastructure serving the subdivision. So I've got a few photos here of the process. This is the only interesting thing about this. We lined a lot of the storm sewers there.
That is a slide.
Yes.
That before I leave, I'm going to have that framed.
So I've still got some of the debris up in the office if you want to take some with you, Jeff, but
I'll take a couple.
we lined a lot of the sewers using a process called cured-in-place pipelining. In order to do that, we had to clean the storm sewers first. They hadn't been cleaned probably at all. We cleaned about 14,000 linear feet of storm sewers, and we removed approximately 300 tons of debris, and not just typical sediment and organic debris, but literally giant chunks of concrete and boulders and sheet metal and Volkswagens and things like that. 45 pounds per linear foot is what we removed. So the equivalent of a small child, my youngest daughter, getting pulled out of every linear foot of pipe. So just a little nugget and tidbit.
So basically, it never worked from day
It
one.
never worked. It didn't work well for a long time because of all that debris that was in there. $3.6 million project to reconstruct what we couldn't line. Go ahead, Kurt. Challenges during construction, but we saw it through, saw the contractor through. We've had the pleasure of working with some great contractors, Kurt, and then the finished product.
Yep.
So ultimately, not only completely rebuilding the stormwater infrastructure, but really transforming the neighborhood as well as part of our work. Again, more in Old South Haven, a $3.4 million project. Less complications on this one, but same story. Oversaw about a year worth of construction here, and roads getting completed with this new storm sewers already in the ground, and then you can see on this next, this was right at substantial completion. The picture on the right there is some detention improvements that we made there, created a really nice landscaping feature within the Portage Township Park there, so added storage, but did it in a way that makes it a real amenity to the community. So, things I'm proud of, we've made significant improvements to the infrastructure over the last 5 years, with the majority of the revenue going back, stormwater user fee revenue going back into projects. As we're doing, we're also compiling a whole lot of knowledge, hard-earned knowledge to apply to future efforts. And the point I wanted to make is why I'm in front of you this morning is because although we've addressed many problems and concerns and issues, and have effectively used the funds, we're limited in what we can do with those funds. The data we've collected, when we opened our office, we had 2,000 complaints already on the books, most of which represented problems that needed to be fixed. Since we've been open, we've collected about 1,600 more complaints, either repeats of old ones, but a lot of them are new things that have popped up. So the point being is we've got a lot of work still in front of us, and this funding will help us get some of these urgent, high-priority projects taken care of in the short term in a way that we wouldn't otherwise have the funding to do. So I'll get into the discussion about the particular projects included in our proposal. I wanted to preface discussion about particular projects with a few key points. We're only going to use the funds to pay for construction. So any of those soft costs associated with any project, design and engineering, which we do most of that in-house, construction administration, construction observation, most of which we do in-house, will all be taken care of either via in-kind services or using user fund, stormwater fund revenue to hire a consultant perhaps to help us move a little quicker on a couple of these. But the point being, typically those soft costs are about 40%, so every 60 cents that is contributed to a stormwater project, we're going to match with 40 cents of our own. The first one I'm going to talk about is a long-standing need. We heard about the fairgrounds earlier. This is at the fairgrounds. This is the drain tile that drains that area, along with areas within, just to the north of the fairgrounds, within the city of Valparaiso, including Pratt, Paper, and the jail is there. This is known as North Stimson Drain, and it's the headwaters to Parker Ditch, a sensitive and important environmental corridor at headwaters for Salt Creek. It's had long-standing capacity and surcharging issues. The county was approached way back in 1999 by the city engineer at the city of Valparaiso about these issues and the impending development that was planned for the area, namely Pratt, Paper. There was a 2002 and 2004 watershed study that was completed. by the city, used JF New, now Cardno, but out of Walkerton, Indiana. They recommended replacement reconstruction of the drain and implementation of green infrastructure practices within the watershed. So way back 20 years ago, there was an identified need to reconstruct this drain. In 2017, right after the department opened, we conducted an updated watershed study with the city of Valparaiso to kind of confirm the findings. At that point, we were unable to even clean or televise the pipe because of the condition of the pipe and how much debris was in the pipe. It's corrugated metal, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but that also recommended replacement reconstruction of the drain. A few exhibits here for you. This goes back to when just the fairgrounds were there. You can kind of, the dark signature on the black and white photo, moving from left to right, is kind of where the drain is located. So you can see back in 1998, there were issues out there with the drain properly functioning even at that point. Jump ahead to 2005, you can see that dark signature increase. You can see the additional urbanization in the watershed, which only exacerbated the issues that the drain was experiencing. And then 2018, you can see how poorly the drain actually was performing, how much was wet at that point. Of course, this is springtime, but each of these was springtime shots before leaf on. So currently, drainage, flooding, poorly performing stormwater management practices. There's a few that serve urban land uses in the city where infiltration basins, for example, don't work like they should. And sinkholes have developed where the tiles, come apart and there's holes that we've had to go in and put a Band-Aid on. The drain was reconstructed back in 1981 using corrugated metal pipe, 15 to 24-inch diameter from upstream to down. Corrugated metal pipe has a 20 to, I say 50 up there, but really about 40 years is about the most we're going to get out of it with our climate, with the salt that we use to take care of our roads. So we're past that life expectancy with this drain. It's undersized, especially with the urban land uses that have been developed in the watershed. A 48-inch storm sewer would be required if it were sized to accommodate those urban land uses. So it was designed originally for agricultural land uses to act as a drain tile. Now we're asking it to be a storm sewer. It doesn't have the size to do that. I mentioned earlier we can't even clean or televise the tile at this point because of the condition that it's in. One of the complications here has been that there's a significant portion of the watershed that's located within the city of Valparaiso, which is urban land uses. The 328 acres in unincorporated Porter County is still agricultural land uses plus the fairgrounds. We have been attempting to secure commitment to contribute from the city to contribute towards a project, and at this point they have not been able to commit to contributing. At this point we need to move forward with a project. Our request here is for $1.25 million. The project would include reconstruction of North Simpson Drain and ditch and wetland improvements at the outfall/upstream end of Parker Ditch. So we've got a lot of invasive species in there. The ditch needs to be improved to accommodate what would be an upsizing of the tile. And we've had initial conversations with the property owner there, and they're more than on board to work with us on doing what needs to be done. It will serve areas, our project would serve areas within unincorporated Porter County only. So the fairgrounds and the agricultural ground to the south of Division Road. Our preliminary design and engineering will be a 24-inch to 36-inch at the downstream end reinforced concrete pipe. That would accommodate our standard release rate. So if the area were developed, the infrastructure would be already in place to accommodate that development. A parallel 6-inch perforated drain tile would accommodate the current agricultural land use, and then ditch improvements and wetland vegetation management, which I mentioned earlier, within that headwaters area of Parker Ditch. Kind of a small exhibit, but shows you basically the alignment of the project and where this would run. So we're using existing regulated drainage easements. We already have the land rights in place to do this. We really just need to finalize design. We're about 30% design at this point, and get to construction.
Can I,
yeah.
Just real quick?
Yeah, stop me at any point
while
along
it's
the way.
on everybody's brain, from the county's perspective, with what's happened out there, because this drain does not work, talking about Pratt put in an infiltration basin for their big plan out there. Well, because that this drain doesn't work, what's happened is our water table
Is way up.
is come real high. So now the infiltration basin at Pratt doesn't work.
And it probably would have never worked if the drain wasn't fixed. And so once the drain's fixed, there's potential that it works better,
Yep.
but the water table still, it's been historically, it's high in this area.
And where-
Which is why the drain tile was there in the first place,
And
right?
why it affects us is Division Road from 49 all the way down to the entrance of Pratt, that's a county road. And that water table is coming out, so we got about 100 trucks a day going in there to Pratt to unload cardboard and what have you. That road is starting to really, do this.
Buckle,
And
that's right.
it's a road, and then when the fair's going, it gets a tremendous amount of beating when the fair goes on. So what it's starting to do, and even when you go out to the grandstands and that whole east part of the fairgrounds, you get a little bit of rain, it just turns into grease out there. So it's really causing a lot of problems out in this area with regards to water table, how that area drains, and it's sort of become just a stopping point and just a mush. It's just become a big mush in there, if that's a technical term, but, so I'm letting you folks know from the county's perspective, infrastructure-wise, and it's a border issue with the county and the city, because Division Road is the city-county line in there, so it's a tricky area that's going on, but it's gone on way too long.
It's gone on way too long.
And so,
And like Jeff said, we're starting to see impacts to other infrastructure
Yep.
as a result of the drain not functioning.
You mentioned it was a need for a 48-inch, and then you turn around, so you only need 24 or 36. Is that because some of the other was going to be offset by other?
Very keen observation. So the 48 would be needed if the city of Valparaiso were also served by the improvement, a 48-inch storm sewer would be needed.
So if they come back and say, yeah, we're on this, it's not going to increase our expenses, they're going to take up that portion.
It's too late, yeah. Well, so they still are connected to the existing drain. They're fully informed as to the condition of that drain. I have no intent to disconnect them from that drain, but that's the point that I've been trying to make to them, is there's value here to working together rather than each of us doing our individual projects. But at this point, we have to, the county has to move forward with.
So you're not ripping out the old drain, you're just putting a new drain basically parallel
We'll put
to
it
it.
parallel within the,
All right.
we have a 150-foot easement.
So that will give you plenty of capacity, that makes sense.
Correct.
Okay. But you're not cleaning out once you hit the city limits, basically.
Correct.
So we're good, but you
Yes.
guys deal with it, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
good question. That's all I have.
Any other questions or comments on Parker Ditch, North Stimson? So I'll move on to Carriage Hills. Carriage Hills is in Jackson Township, County Road 550 East, north of County Road 900 North. The subdivision was constructed in 1999 to 2000. It's only 20 years old. As you'll see in a moment, we're having significant, sudden, and catastrophic storm sewer collapses out there. Reviewing why this is happening, the construction plans are completely different from what is actually in the ground out there. The pipe's in the wrong location, it's not the correct materials, it's incorrectly, the pipe that's out there is incorrectly sized, there was a neglection of off-site flow, about 100 acres that comes to and through the development. So right now, it's 18 to 36-inch pipe, mostly relatively flexible, well, very flexible, high-density polyethylene pipe. There is some reinforced concrete pipe that we would plan to reuse as part of the project. We should get at least 50 years out of a system like this, more like 75 years. But because of poor construction practices, because of the lack of bedding, stone backfill, final backfill, it looks like they just took the dozer and pushed all the clay in giant chunks, which if you're putting it on top of that flexible pipe, you're going to crush it, you're going to perforate it. So Kurt, go ahead and move forward. You probably saw these shots in the paper back in February. The storm sewer runs directly below that driveway, and we had two cars collapse into sinkhole that formed as a result of the pipe collapsing and sucking all of the material, or most of the material above, into the pipe. There were a couple people in one of the vehicles. Fortunately, neither of them were seriously injured, but it made for a long and somewhat arduous, at least for me and for the people affected, Friday night back in the cold February. So we need to get this fixed. As I mentioned before, our annual budget is about $1 million. This would allow us to get this project done. It needs to be done as soon as possible. It will allow us to do that. The project will include the reconstruction of the storm sewer system, using the correct materials, correctly sized. We're going to add curb inlets because the roads are impacted by relatively poor drainage, lack of inlets. So we would correct all those issues out there, accommodate the private drains that exist that serve the septic systems out there, for example, and put this thing back together the way it should be put together. And there's a look just at the alignment. We have an existing detention facility out there, which is more than adequately sized, so we'll make use of that. And then the downstream end, as I mentioned, already has reinforced concrete pipe. We would plan to reuse that and then rebuild from that point upstream. Questions about that one?
No, I think the only question I had is, we had talked about this before, because the roads would have to be paved in there.
They would, because the storm sewer would be under the paved section of the roadway.
So does ARP cover, yes, Vicky got a yes, okay. Because I know that was a question I asked a while back, but nobody knew, so that's been determined now, okay.
Generally, roads are not an allowable
Right.
use, but I had this called up before. There is a section where it says that if there is a stormwater project that involves the impact to a road, the road can be reconstructed
Okay.
using ARPA monies.
So
That's
that,
good news.
that 1.25 included that?
It does include that, yes.
Thanks. I just wanted to get that clarified.
Yep.
So,
And Mike, the only question I have regarding that particular project, how, knowing that the sinkhole happened, and of course the pictures and the safety of it became apparent, was that high on our list prior to that, or was that kind of one of those unknown surprises?
Great question. So it was not high up on our list. We did have, we did some pipe repair out there back in 2018 and videoed the storm sewer system at that time. It looked in less than ideal condition, but certainly didn't give us an indication that we would have something like this happen. We just re-videoed it after this happened, and it's changed significantly. It's falling apart.
Yeah. And my point in mentioning that is, of course, what was happening in 99 and 2000 appears to be the wild, wild west in terms of infrastructure.
Yes.
And we certainly didn't have the expertise and the knowledge and the oversight and supervision that you and the department have now. And so for whatever we have to clean up, which, and my point is, who knows what the other surprises are.
oh, it's all underground.
I will tell you, when we start looking at under the ground in any of these subdivisions, the news is not typically good. So we are trying to, get to the most urgent of problems, and Old South Haven was a primary example because the sinkholes we had in Carriage Hills were happening frequently in Old South Haven. Same in the next couple projects I'm going to talk about here. So we're trying to anticipate as best we can where the worst of the issues are, but it's not to say we won't have a Carriage Hills pop up somewhere else in the county, just because, like you said, it appears to have been the wild, wild west with no oversight pretty much whatsoever, so we don't really know what's in the ground.
And the fortunate thing, of course, is we know 20 years from now, the county won't be faced with the same issues because of that oversight that you have.
That would be my gift to my successor, I hope.
You're doing it.
Never saw that present, did you?
Doing it right. I mean, that's,
Do it right. We're going to do it, if we're building new subdivisions, if we're doing repair projects, we're going to do them right.
Well, I think this is a typical example where you have a developer's mentality and then a government's mentality. Government looks at everything 50, 75, 100 years, because it's ours forever. businesses look at 3 to 5 years and how can they get out
Yep.
on these type of things.
Right.
So that's where the two are constantly colliding. And I think, when we started our stormwater
constant
and plan
collisions,
commission,
too.
it's still this way. It's even gotten, because now we're oversight and we're catching it and we're directing them to fix it. And it's been a change in, I think everybody now knows there's been a change in what we're doing up here now, but there's been a lot of kicking and screaming though, to get us there. So.
Well, and I just, because I think it's important that we're having this discussion, we're gonna have minutes and a video to backfill a little bit. I mean, I think we've touched around it, but, when we talk about 20, 30 years ago, I mean, it's not just nobody.
Yes,
Because there wasn't a department.
correct.
It was a drainage board.
I mean, it's, to get to the point where we're at now, it took a 2007 stormwater ordinance change, it took a stormwater fee being passed, it took a stormwater department being created, and then all the way to inspectors on the ground who are knowledgeable enough to know that the plan says this is supposed to be in the ground, this type of pipe, this type of bedding, laid this particular way. It took a lot, and that's why it took a lot of work to get to the point where we're at now. Whereas to Mr. Jessen's point, we don't anticipate this in 20 years because of those things. And as Mike has said, part of the push, because that's a lot of movement in government to get all of that put together, part of that push was constantly going to subdivisions, 20 years, 30 years down the road. The as-built, engineered, signed schematics or plans.
As-built.
The pipe isn't even on that side of the road.
Yep.
It's supposed to be
It's-
doing something at an intersection with a hard, and it's not. And so it took a lot of work because, again, the private community, the private developers aren't real happy when they have to call and get an inspector out and this is done right, et cetera. And so there's always that give and take, and it's always easy to say, well, this is just government red tape and slowdown. I guess my point is that unless we do this as efficiently as possible, the subdivision we just saw is the natural occurrence
Yep.
of not having that oversight. And ultimately, what you
Yes.
end up doing is, instead of getting 50 to 75 years of life out of something, or 50 years, and then you can line it and get another 25 or 50 years, you end up with a complete redo in 20 that, the taxpayers pay for. So it's complicated, it's hard to get in a nutshell or a soundbite, but the process to get there is important, and I just don't want, as people are paying attention at times
No,
that
it's
they
great.
don't pay attention, this is a long thread, and it's not like all of a sudden Porter County cares about stormwater. It's taken basically from 2007 till now to get to all the way to the point where we need it to be.
And I think, again, the slide earlier, when we saw the 45 pounds every foot in 13,000 feet of pipe, that was our first big project that this board took on. And you can imagine when we saw that, we're like, holy mackerel, what else is out there? And it is nonstop since then now. It's been nonstop.
I think we figured out that some of that debris was in there because the pipes were being put into basically a water table that was floating them out. And so they needed to be held down long enough to get covered up with dirt. And so that stuff never left. And then on some of the times, we were dealing with sinkholes. It was just sinkhole season out there
Yep.
every year. Well, when you fill those sinkholes, sometimes that ends up in the pipe. And so that is why we took out just an astronomical amount of weight out of those pipes, because, again, from day one, it was probably put in with the wrong material, the wrong place, the wrong way. And then we,
Covered it up.
20, 30 years later, we're surprised it's completely failing.
Yep. So keep going, Mike.
May I ask a question?
Yep.
I've been on the plan commission.
Yes.
When I've served, and so I've seen, private enterprise come before us that say, the engineers say that it's going to work, everything's fine. Has that all been changed now to where you guys look at the plans of,
Yes.
and verify that, yes, this
What I
will-
would tell you, Sylvia, is that prior to me getting here, there was a lot of work, subdivision reviews, things like that were being done by third-party consultants, because we didn't have the staff. And one of the big things about forming this department was that we now are employing the people that are reviewing this stuff and have accreditations and our engineers. So now, as we're all held accountable,
okay.
we have registered engineers working for the county, making sure that that goes through, because we think that that was maybe why some of the approvals and things could have been tainted before, because people were over, under, pushing this through. Oh, this consulting firm said it's okay. Right now, the way we're going is, it's our people, the people that we can hold accountable, Sylvia, as councilmen and commissioners. Those are the people that we now can hold accountable to that. And so that's very important. It's a good question.
And it's very good to hear that, because it would get to the point where, I've been here long enough that I can remember subdivisions that went before by the Plan Commission, and they failed. And I thought, my gosh, what were the engineers
But
thinking?
the engineer said it was going to work, right?
Yes. Thank you, that's very reassuring.
So
Now we can check the checker.
that's right. So the the simple answer to that question is yes. The process is completely different. We could talk for an hour about all the how that works, the nuances, as Scott alluded to. You know, all the hard work that's been done to develop this department, this stormwater program. A lot of it's unseen. But there's a whole lot of work that has gone into it. And all these projects that I'm presenting are an outgrowth of our efforts, our planning, our investigation, the hard work we've done over the last 6 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move on into Shorewood.
Yep.
Mike, we'll keep pushing
Keep
here. I
moving.
know it's a lot to cover, but
So Shorewood Forest, Old South, we talked about Old South Haven earlier, identified as a top priority using our evaluation criteria. Shorewood and Greater South Haven were selected as the next two sort of priority areas due to age of development, amount of properties impacted, all those criteria. So we undertook stormwater infrastructure studies in both of these subdivision. We are wrapping those up. They're going to be released to the public in early May, so very early next month. We are targeting ARPA funding for several high-priority or urgent projects identified in those studies. So I'm going to talk about Shorewood now. Screenshot of the cover there, so you'll see that on the website soon enough. Shorewood Forest is a interesting blend of gray infrastructure, so pipes and inlets and those things, as well as green infrastructure. The terrain out there, built a dam, built a lake, all ravines. Those ravines were also used for stormwater management and conveyance. So about half is pipe, about half is ravines. We investigated via closed circuit television camera almost all of the pipes. Some we weren't able to access because of debris or condition of the pipe, but over 50% of the pipes serving the subdivision are in need of reconstruction or rehabilitation. Those are mainly in the older portions of the subdivision with construction that started back in the early 70s using corrugated metal pipe. So we would expect to see what we saw because we're past the life expectancy of that pipe. Newer sections were constructed using reinforced concrete pipe, so that's a plus. But nearly every ravine has been significantly impacted by downcutting, widening, and erosion. Those storm sewers often discharge at the top of those ravines. When you put a concentrated stormwater discharge at those ravines, you'll develop head cuts, and all of that sand, readily erodible material in the ravines will erode away and makes its way into the lake and then portions downstream. It leads to Salt Creek. So some television footage. On the left is reinforced concrete pipe, so looks great. On the right, you can see corrugated metal pipe with basically no bottom at this point, so hard to even get the camera through there, and probably not lineable, so this would be a section where we'd have to replace via open cut construction. These are a couple of the ravine shots. There's many more that I could share, but typical situations where you've got that concentrated discharge discharging to the ravines have eaten away. The one in the bottom right has actually been like a retrofit where the pipe originally discharged higher up the slope, but all that area on each side of the bank there eroded away, so kind of put a slope drain in there and put it at the bottom of the ravine. The request for Shorewood-related projects is $685,000. It will include 2 projects in the Devon Ravine, one to reconstruct the sediment forebay, and one to implement erosion control and flow control measures within the ravine. The ravine is the largest tributary drainage area and the most significant contributor of sediment, debris, and other pollutants to the lake, Lake Louise, as well as areas downstream leading all the way to Salt Creek. And then the other project would be implementation of what we're calling the 219-221 Shorewood Drive Ravine Restoration Demonstration Project. So there's the location of projects 3 and 5, the Devon Ravine projects. This is a map showing the tributary drainage areas to Lake Louise. The bottom red, one in red, is the Devon ravine. So that's you can see that's the largest. There's some offsite areas, there's some agricultural areas that drain through that ravine. So just to give you some idea of where that's at. And so here's 30% concept plans for the projects. This is reconstruction of the forebay. There is a forebay in there now, but it's woefully undersized. So it's full, it's not easily maintained. This would correct that. This would make it easily maintainable. This would be correct sizing, allow us to get in there then periodically to scoop out that sediment and debris that makes its way through the ravine into the lake. The next shot, so this is right at the, sort of the south end of Shorewood where the ravine comes into Shorewood Forest. There's already kind of a detention basin there. There's a path, a walking nature trail that crosses that ravine. So what we would do is modify that detention basin to increase storage and provide additional then flow control and erosion control for the ravine. So trying to reduce the amount of water that's moving through that ravine and causing the erosion. This is the location of 219 and 221 Shorewood. I've got some pictures that show the conditions in this ravine. So again, corrugated metal pipe, deteriorated, but really significant erosion. And this is a problem I discovered early on in my time here. It needs to be done. What we would do is, this is going to be a demonstration or a pilot project to show how we would restore these ravines. And essentially, this is a process or a concept that was developed in the coastal plain of Maryland, Piedmont to coastal plain, where you have ravine-type terrain, to address this very problem, where you've got concentrated discharges at the top of a steep slope. Basically, we're restoring that ravine. Sand and wood chip bed basically will fill the ravine in. That would be our access road. And then there's large weirs that basically step the water down the slope during large events. So during small events, it'll all just seep into the ground. During large events, you'll have a little cascade until it can replenish and get into that sand and wood chip bed. So it would they function much as a natural ravine would do, but they're engineered to accommodate these much higher flows and concentrated flows that we're putting into these ravines now. So this would be the first of what I hope to be many ravine restoration projects in Shorewood.
Is there a life expectancy on that? Is that, once it's in, it's 1,000 years, you don't have to worry about it again?
Once it's in, it's, yeah, at least until I retire, no, but more than 100 years, because we're using boulders to form those weirs, so.
Slow that water down.
Yep, so.
That was more where the wood chips would break down, it would be able to drain still?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Greater South Haven, so this is actually 3 subdivisions, Coventry, New South Haven, and Salt Creek Valley Commons. So immediately adjacent to Old South Haven, sort of developed as an outgrowth of that original Old South Haven development. New South Haven was constructed beginning in the late 1960s, again using corrugated metal pipe. Salt Creek Valley Commons construction began in the early 1970s using corrugated metal pipe. Coventry is a little different story, more reflects what we saw in Carriage Hills. Construction began in the mid-1990s using dual-wall, high-density polyethylene, HDPE storm sewers. My notes down at the bottom are what we found as a result of putting cameras through the pipe. 75% of the pipes in New South Haven are in need of reconstruction rehabilitation. The good thing is nearly all of that appears to be lineable.
Yeah, thank goodness.
They're in fairly good shape at this point, so, but we need to get, we need to get on it at some point in the near future to line those things. 85% of the storm sewers in Salt Creek Valley Commons are in need of reconstruction or rehabilitation. However, 70% of those pipes need to be replaced. It's a matter of some conjecture. My guess is that they used a lower grade pipe, lower gauge pipe, so thinner, and probably not. What we've seen in Old South Haven, New South Haven, is there was an all asphalt lining on it, sort of a dipped product. We certainly didn't have that in Salt Creek Valley Commons, so that's probably explains why we're seeing a little longer lifespan in New South Haven. Coventry, 100% of the storm sewers are in need of replacement, because when you run the camera through those and you look at the video, it looks like you're on a roller coaster ride, and that's not a good thing when you're looking at storm sewers. Salt Creek Valley Commons also has 2 detention basins. They were just basically dammed up streams and put outlet control structures on them. At this point, those outlets, those pipes leading out of the basins are about 5 foot below the bottom of the basin, which means that there's been a lot of sediment, debris accumulated over the last 50 years, and a lack of maintenance. That causes some storm sewer backups, roadway and structural flooding issues, particularly in one little neighborhood in Salt Creek Valley Commons. Off-site flow was also neglected during design, which leaves some of those pipes undersized. New South Haven, really the only major thing that we saw, pipes need to be lined. There was off-site flow that was neglected, so we do have some capacity issues there. Coventry, again, poor construction practices, the only explanation for what happened there. The request here is for $1.65 million. The projects would include construction of the Newcastle Road storm bypass sewer in New South Haven. That would address the off-site flow that was neglected, routed around the subdivision, and alleviate some roadway flooding issues that we have resulted from that. Implementation of the Olney area storm sewer reconstruction project, so this would reconstruct that portion of the storm sewer in New South Haven that needs to be reconstructed. In Salt Creek Valley Common, we've also got 2 projects. The Sable Drive storm sewer reconstruction project, and this one needs to be done right away. And then the detention pond cleaning and outfall reconstruction project, this would alleviate that structural and roadway flooding we've got in Salt Creek Valley Commons by getting that pond to function more efficiently. So again, apologize for the scale here. This is New South Haven. The red polygon in the middle of the page, that's the only reconstruction project, and then the L-shaped red polygon at the bottom there, that's the bypass sewer.
But Mike, if these things are fixed up and cleaned up, I mean, right now I'm assuming the water is draining, so it basically just sits in the ground on top of our surface level. Once they're working correctly, obviously much more of the water is now going somewhere. Where it's going, are we just pushing the problem further down the stream, or where is it emptying out to?
Great question. So in this case, there is a combination drain tile, storm sewer, and grass waterway that convey the runoff from the majority of New South Haven to Salt Creek. Salt Creek is right, sort of at the bottom right of your picture.
Okay.
It's right off the page. That's actually in pretty good shape. We do have some point repairs we need to do there, but we would take care of those using stormwater fund dollars prior to implementing.
River could take, or whatever it's draining to could
Yes,
take.
Salt Creek can certainly take.
Okay.
Yes, can certainly
Didn't know
take
if we were
that.
going to push the problem to Salt Creek next and just kind of, no, okay.
Well, the thing with Salt Creek is you really can't get in there and do anything either, because it's a protected tributary too, so
Correct. So we're not necessarily changing the volume that makes it there. We're changing sort of the hydrograph, the timing with which
Yeah,
that
so I guess
runoff
it'd be
gets
question.
there.
It'd be more rush come at one
So
time.
Salt Creek is very flashy already. It has fairly good floodplain connectivity. A lot of it has to do with debris jams that hold things up and push water into the floodplain. But even at the scale of this development, we're far enough down on Salt Creek that the minor improvements the changes we're making here, you wouldn't really see any impact at all on Salt Creek.
We just finished a project out there on the other part of it with the U.S. Army Corps, where our detention basins were just not big enough.
Right.
We just redid one up there that's like a huge lake now. We got federal Army Corps money to match to go in there and do that. But there was a lack of capacity in this whole area. It's funny, they really didn't need the capacity because the system wasn't working.
Yeah.
But you know,
Yeah.
now we have capacity and now the system's working. And I'd like to point out one other thing. I know this is a little thing, but if you go back to that first South Haven project where you saw the before-after pictures, what we did in there, because there's such a high water table in that South Haven area, we actually, Mike and his department, we actually coordinated on that 13,000 feet street, Governor Road. Every one of those homes had their sub pumps tied into our storm drainage system. We made sure if they got the pipe out there, we would connect it. Because that was the other problem. Everybody was just dumping their water out on the, right up next to the curb, and it was undermining the curb. It was
Causing icing during the winter.
Icing and slips and falls, and I think when we tied all, we thought long and hard about doing that, but if you can see how close together these houses are, we had to do something to get that water out of there, and it's worked tremendously well. So I would imagine there's going to be some of that type of stuff
Right.
going on when we're doing these, just to get these houses. And I will say, I think this is something that we can all sort of take a victory lap on, is that, when we went into South Haven and we started having the public outreach meetings and meeting with everybody, there was a lot of doubt on whether we could come in and do what we did. And we have a lot of believers up there now in what we can do, but it's been a long road, and it's an area that was just extremely neglected, and house values, when we went in there and started, house values were in there trading 3-bedroom ranches anywhere from $130,000 to $175,000, depending on the condition. Now they're up, obviously we have a hot real estate market right now, but these houses now are in the lower 250s they're trading for. So that investment now has, elevated all the boats, and there's an eventual payback for that, much longer because we're government, but I think things are moving in the right direction now with the cost return ROI type thing. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
And then this just shows the two project areas in Salt Creek Valley Commons. The storm sewer reconstruction, like Old South Haven, a lot of these storm sewers go through rear and side yards where we really don't have the room to do open cut construction. So in this case, we would move the storm sewer from the rear and side yards to the paved section of the roadway, and then abandon those existing deteriorated storm sewers in place. We bulkhead them at each end and then pressure grout so that they don't continue to collapse. And then the lower polygon, the blue line work down there, that's the detention basin, the south detention basin. And that area just to the right on your screen, just to the east of that detention basin, that's the area that has roadway and folks getting water into their crawl spaces, their lower living levels there. This is shots of storm sewers there in Salt Creek Valley Commons. Both of these are indicative of what we got there. No, the one on the upper left, there's no bottom there whatsoever. The one on the bottom right there shows a little bit of a bottom. It looks more like leaves, but that's actually the deteriorated metal of the pipe. So you can see right at the flow line there and below, that's where the deterioration really has occurred. So two more for you. Bear with me. This is Kemper Ditch, Arm 18. Chris and Shirley Hines Land Trust discussed this earlier with regards to their land acquisition a little bit, but I wanted to talk to you about a little more of the big picture here and what we're asking for, what we're planning to do with the funds we're requesting. Kemper Ditch Arm 18 was constructed in 1914 for draining wet and lowlands to make them sufficiently dry and productive, fertile, and valuable for farming and agriculture. So they went in, but basically over the last 100 years, there's been no maintenance or upkeep. mostly stemming from the fact, Scott hit on a few of the reasons, but there was also no watershed assessment here, so no funding to do any work. At this point, it's in need of significant reconstruction. However, we have been working with IDNR, National Park Service, Shirley Hines Land Trust, and other partners on concepts and projects in this areas that would restore drainage and serve the existing watershed, but also reduce flooding, improve water quality, restore those wet and lowlands, and provide educational, environmental education and outreach, and then enhance the ecosystem services that the watershed provides. So things like carbon sequestration, habitat, air quality, having that native vegetation in those restored wetlands in place will provide. Kurt, you can go if it's, thank you. This just shows the watershed for Kemper Ditch, Arm 18. The watershed stops at that we delineated here, stops at the parcel that Shirley Hines is interested in acquiring. Concurrent to these efforts, there's a petition to vacate this portion of Arm 18. That would allow IDNR to use funds from their stream and wetland mitigation program on that parcel to do a significant wetland restoration project, so a significant wetland mitigation project. So that would happen. We need to reconstruct the drain to that point.
Would they take over the maintenance of
They
that?
would take over the maintenance of that with Shirley Hines, would maintain that.
Okay.
And then upstream of there, we would have basically an easement exchange, and instead of going diagonally across, that's IDNR, it's the old prison farm property, and then there's one other private property involved. We would basically go up the property line. So if you would move ahead, and both of those parties are ready to grant the easement. I have the paperwork drawn up. I just have to present it to them. Our request would be for $235,000. Again, the projects would include replacement reconstruction of the drain tile at the upstream end of Kemper Ditch Arm 18, new storm sewer to make sure that that 100-plus acre drainage area isn't impacted. Bring an existing private drain tile that comes in from way to the east across IDNR property into the public system. There's a minor subdivision there that has at least eight properties where their septic system perimeter drains drain to that drain tile. Nobody maintains it. We'd bring that into the public system so we could look over it. So nobody's septic systems are impacted. Vacation, I mentioned the vacation of the easement to allow the wetland mitigation project, and then restoration and daylighting of the downstream end of Kemper Ditch, Arm 18, dependent upon the acquisition of the property by Shirley Hines Land Trust. Otherwise, if it stays in purely agricultural land use, we'd do a straight drain tile reconstruction. So there's a look at, this is the upstream end, this is where I mentioned the easement exchange. So that shows the alignment of the new storm sewer. At the outfall of that, it gets into a ravine, natural ravine stream system, so it would flow naturally then down to what would become a wetland area. These are the properties, the 8 properties that are served by the drain tile crossing IDNR's property. IDNR will grant us an easement to put that drain tile into the public infrastructure. So I think that's a win here as well. This is the downstream end where basically the stream's already restoring itself, but we would, if Shirley Hines acquires this, we would break the remaining drain tile. We'd do grading project to recreate the stream channel. Basically preliminary sizing, 2-foot bottom, 2-foot deep, 2 to 1 side slopes. We'd excavate along that corridor as well and add riffles, sort of check dams, to allow the water to spread into the floodplain then during rain events. So that's where we get into that flood storage, all those water quality benefits, and we'd make that reconnection at sort of the natural, where streams, if they're in undisturbed watershed, they connect with their floodplains during the 1.5 or 2 year event, and that would be our design criteria here. Last one I've got for you is Willow Creek Road and County Road 700 North flood reduction project. Long-standing roadway flooding issues on Willow Creek Road, particularly on Willow Creek Road North, it's County Road 700, but we also have overtopping of County Road 700 North. the periodic intermittent roadway closures due to the roadway being impassable to vehicles, just too much water on the pavement. And Willow Creek Road there is in a low-lying area. Design and engineering efforts have been underway for a number of years, led by the city of Portage. Over the last few years, we've partnered with the city of Portage on trying to address this situation, and both parties are making pro rata contributions to the project. The city of Portage has already spent a lot of money on design and engineering. They would put money into land acquisition if we need it, but I think working with the landowner, he's more than willing to work with us on getting this project just via easement. So, and those contributions are based on the drainage area with a runoff really within the watershed. And this shows the watershed.
It's sort of a complicated area because it's flooding in Portage.
Correct.
The city of Portage is flooding, but the water that's coming to them is ours because it's at 700 North. So that water, it's actually going north. I know you usually think everything goes down, but it's actually going north. So that's why we're involved in this, and we're trying to figure out, we've been talking about a collective agreement, and I think that if we can get that project done, when it initially came out before we had our county engineer, Sylvia, they were talking that this project was going to be a lot of money. And now that Mike's been involved, we've been able to re-engineer it and make it a much more easier fix and a cost-effective fix. Because when the Willow Creek extension, if that ever gets done, that's where you terminate or start Willow Creek right there.
Right.
And there'll be an extensive amount of drainage work done when that road goes in too. Right now, you don't have an outlet there. And that's what that road's going to give you is a drainage outlet too when you build that road. So, but I think, Mike and I talked about this. I think that, for us, whether it's the city of Portage or not, those are county residents, and we need to do whatever we can do to help them not have their house flood. So that's why this has been brought forward, and
Yeah, and unfortunately, watersheds, right, they don't obey municipal boundaries. They cross,
They do
so
what
that's,
they wanna do.
we have to work together, right? We have to work together. We have a stake in this, the city has a stake in it, they're both stepping up. And we do have impacts to our infrastructure as well, so County Road 700 North does overtop.
it gets beat up because the water's going over,
yes.
it, undermining it, and
So this request is for $930,000. So Jeff mentioned this, and I appreciate you saying that, Jeff, because the original solution, I think there were various machinations that DLZ came up with for the city, but what was ultimately settled on was a sort of traditional gray infrastructure solution. 3 big holes in the ground at the end of a pipe, and then basically you'd have a lot of dead storage. They would be underwater most of the time. So what we did is take that same storage, but we spread it out over that entire watershed. So we would start our work all the way at that upstream end through a bioswale and enhanced grass waterway that would slow water down, allow it to infiltrate, allow it to evapotranspirate. We would need 2 detention or sort of bioretention areas along 700 North. There would need to be some ditch enhancements along Willow Creek Road there, the existing Willow Creek Road, and a little bit of plumbing, some piping to plumb it all together. But basically, we've come up with a solution that replaces that traditional approach with a much more sort of green infrastructure-centric approach to the problem. And I think the slide speaks to that. And there's a look at the kind of the 30% design. The shapes of these has changed a little bit, but basically we're working with the existing terrain there to add storage to the landscape. The little finger that comes out at the bottom of the screen there, the bottom right, that would be the bioswale, and that would extend all the way to the next county road. So.
The only thing I would add to that is I think maybe Mike buried the lead a little bit there on the original DLZ plan that has the storage and the more traditional plan. Mr. Hazard will be interested to know that this reduced the amount of frontage road on either 700 or Willow Creek, which was going to be the original large ponds. When I say large, 60 acres.
Yes.
yeah, big pond, lake.
On Willow Creek Road and 700, I mean, one of the prime real estate areas there has reduced it down to, I mean, we're not even 100% sure if we're gonna have fee simple land acquisition if we're gonna be able to do it with easements, but I think the affected land has been reduced by 2/3.
Yes, we're about 20 acres with the total footprint here.
Yeah, so a massive, so just the long term, not only is it not only is it more expensive, I mean, less expensive, but it's also not taking very centrally located land out of circulation and therefore off the tax rolls and not available for development forever. So this is one of those that, you know, again, it's hard to see the negative in the movement on this.
Right.
And it's not magic, so think of it like this, the 60 acres, a lot of that storage was underwater. There would be a permanent water surface in those ponds, and then some of that would be, all the spoil that they dug out of those ponds would be stacked up, you know, right along there. So we're not losing, we don't have any dead storage here. We have dry detention basins. It's using the topography and terrain, and we can burn the spoil, like, you know, as part of that earthwork. So so it's not magic, but it's just a different way of approaching the problem.
Bioswales are our new friends.
From a capacity standpoint, you design, obviously, we know what the current flood rating is, but if, for example, if we get more rain over the next 10 years, or we get more, how do you account for the fact that we might get wetter?
Great question. So this is something we will be working on at the department in the next few years, is transitioning. Right now, our basis of design and most stormwater standards basis of design is based on historic rainfall data. We need to move to probably more probabilistic, I don't know what that word is, but probability-based models, okay, where it's forecasting based on the changes we have seen in rainfall data. So rather than designing for yesterday's events, we're at least designing with some contingency, some additional capacity in mind. The design on this isn't finalized yet. Our basis so far has been using rainfall data record, so. But it would address the problem up to the 100-year event,
Okay.
or the event that has a 1% chance of occurring during any given year.
Okay.
In this area too, where there's going to be development occurring, so as that's going on, there's going to be additional drainage projects that would.
Additional detention, right, for those projects.
Yeah.
Yep.
That makes sense.
That's why that road now, you know, we always talk about Willow Creek as a road, but that whole west side of the county where that road goes, there's no drainage outlets in that whole 9 miles. And it's some of the worst drained property in the county. And when you punch that road there, it's not only gonna get, you know, support services, fire, ambulance quicker up to that hospital there. And it's gonna really help us getting that water up to Lake Michigan.
Yep.
Is what it's gonna help us do. You know, on the south part of the county, we have a pretty integrated and developed infrastructure system of drains and everything that take that water down to Kankakee River. If you ever go down South County and drive through there, you'll see some of these ditches that are just huge. And so South County, we have that infrastructure in place to carry that water to the lake. On the north side, where the water goes to the north, you get up in this area, Union Township, South Haven, Portage, there's not really a lot of clear indications how to get to Lake Michigan. So the bad thing is they're not there. The good thing is that if you develop and you keep putting infrastructure in, you're going to be able to put a better system in as you develop to help drain that area. So there's a lot of history that you have to get into in the stormwater type thing, that you really have to go back and look on a lot of these things. So it's
those ditches
a lot of history.
Those ditches in South County had to be built so that they could create the land, because most of that was under, it was marsh.
Yep.
So, whereas the rest of the county, you might have had intermittent wetlands, but you had land already, so you just had to kind of build little drain tiles.
They've actually proven now, like in Portage, you know, where the judicial center is in Portage on Willow Creek there, they've actually, when we redid that building, they actually said depending on the amount of water in Lake Michigan, if it's full, it'll push that water further out, the groundwater out, and your water table in that area there could fluctuate 2 feet in 1 year. Be dependent on the lake. How much volume's in the lake, it pushes that water inland. It's pretty interesting, I think.
Well, I threw a lot out at you guys. Thanks for, all of you were paying attention the whole time, so thanks for bearing with me.
And I would offer to anybody on the board that if you have any technical questions, just email them to Mike, because he's got a lot going on, but get it to him in an organized fashion, and he's our resource, and while we're up here, he's your resource too, so use him however.
Last one was
That's always for you guys.
You mentioned there might be some shared costs on that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the city has already sort of contributed their match in terms of the design work they already did. Although if fee simple acquisition were needed, they're still at the table for that.
Right.
Okay.
But we're not in discussion, at least preliminary discussions with the landowner.
The number you gave us would be our number, it's not going to be.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
That's correct.
Okay, so what we're going to do now, before we leave here, we're going to open up for public comment here, if anybody has any public comment. But we would like the comment to stay to these particular ones we talked about today, because we obviously haven't heard the other ones. But with that, we'll open up the public hearing, give your name, your address, and we'll go from there. Public hearing's open.
I just happened to drop by this morning because I thought VLACD would be involved, but they're not, so I had to...
Can we get your name and address?
Oh, Tom Banaszak, 3402 Flint Lake Gateway.
Okay.
I do have some questions relative to, it's an interesting thing because this Rescue Act was for coronavirus, and it lasted maybe 3 years, and it's kind of over with now, and yet I got all this money from President Biden, and it's going to fix up infrastructures which have been neglected for the last 40 years. Interesting point. Yeah, this brings up some questions that Mike brought up here. He was talking about Park Ditch Headwaters, Park Ditch Headwaters. And he mentioned something to the effect that the city stormwater was involved, because it's a city stormwater and also county stormwater project. But the city's not involved. The question I have is, there seems to be a jurisdictional issue. A developer does something, let's say, in the city, and correspondingly, maybe things aren't done quite right when it comes to silt retention or so forth, et cetera. And all of a sudden, all this silt goes into an area where the county has jurisdiction. And all of a sudden, it's the people, the public, the taxpayer in the county that has to pay the fix-up of all the silt that's coming from another jurisdiction. Has this ever been settled in court as to who is responsible for the cleanup? Let's say you're working on, for example, you're doing something right now. Is it the Park Ditch Headwaters? And this has incorporated stormwater from the city of Valparaiso also, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Why hasn't the city got involved and paid some of the cost of doing this project?
That would be a question for the city.
Pardon?
That would be a question for the city. My department has made...
Wait, what did he say? Question to the city?
Said that the city, that would be a decision that the city of Valpo would need to make on whether they would want to contribute or be part of the project, because they have they're their own unit of government. They have their own budgets. They have their own, and yeah, these jurisdictional problems do cause problem. We not only have them here, we have them in Chesterton, we have them.
Oh, yeah, there's no question about it. This is statewide.
But I think you bring up a very good point, sir.
The governor, for example, even down in the whole state, the governor fills in an isolated wetland. The isolated wetland held water that all of a sudden crosses the road and goes into another county. And all of a sudden, this county is responsible for more stormwater. I don't think there's been an oversight in this thing at all. Where I'm coming from is, basically speaking, I have a wetland out in Flint Lake, which has highly been impacted by city and county stormwater. It started off from the Flint Lake Elementary School, as you well know. And it seems like there's a lot of finger pointing. I mean, the Listenberger Drain, which flows into our little silt trap there and into the wetlands and into the lake, was originally a county drain. And then the watershed, Flint Lake watershed, was increased in size.
Is your home in the Valpo Area Lakes District?
Pardon?
Is your home in the Valpo Area Lakes District, the Conservancy
Yes.
District? Okay.
Yeah, so.
Just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, there
Which
is.
is your own unit of government, which you have your own ability to do whatever you do, but
So there we go. You know, I got pictures of all this silt and stuff which has come from development from the city or in the county. in the
or
past.
within your own subdivision.
Possibly,
Well,
but very
probably.
little, very little.
Okay.
When you got the Listenberger Drain, it's taking city and, ex-county water and in city water, and crosses the road, and all of a sudden, it's our problem. I don't think there's ever was taken to court legally. There's one case, back on the Fawn River there, where somebody took DNR to court because some silt flowed across their property, and I don't want to get back into that. But, I don't know, that's case law. But this is an issue. I don't think a jurisdiction has ever taken another jurisdiction in court. For example, corporations, they have a certain, when a certain department goes ahead and initiates some kind of activity and it affects another department and costs the county, and that department has to pay back this other department. There's no payback here at all when this subdivision goes and went into the other. And that's one of the complaints I wanted to bring up. I honestly feel that maybe certain jurisdictions should challenge another jurisdiction legally and say, look, you're creating a lot of silt and it's your stuff, you pay. And I think this is something that should be addressed possibly in this Park Ditch headquarters. Because when you go to the city, they're just going to say, oh, that crossed that line. That's over in the county's problem. That's the county's problem.
Well, for that to be changed, sir. it
So
would have
shouldn't
to
the county go ahead and take the city to court?
No, my guess would be that if there was, would be more of an effort of collaboration, that you might actually get more done than taking anything to court. I think you take anything to court, it could go on forever, and 20 years from now, we'd be talking about the same topic. So my thought would be that if we could work together collaboratively with all the different jurisdictions, that we might have a better crack at actually fixing something for a change.
Well, it just...
If I might make a few comments to that, on that point. I think that's a great point. And Mike, I think hit the nail on the head. My goal, my approach, my philosophy since coming to the county has been to build partnerships, to build relationships with our sister jurisdictions. In the case of North Stimson Drain, Parker Ditch, it certainly hasn't been for a lack of trying on my end or on the county's end to develop a partnership that would bear fruit, meaning financial backing to get the project done. We're at a point, however, as I explained during my presentation, we're at a point where we have to move on a project. And we will design in a way that will serve the county properties. The city would still have an opportunity to come to the table, but the ship's sailing, so if they want to come, they would have to do so quickly. Otherwise, they'll be on their own.
And I would like to just add to that conversation that, yes, in a world in which stormwater has matured all the way to all of the individual units of government that are controlling the stormwater and their boundaries were all the way put together and funded, and all of them are actually have the funding and have either increased their fees or their ad valorem tax rates, so they're able to keep care of the areas in which they have been designated, that at some point down the road, I foresee a situation in which what the citizen is talking about could be a problem. Yes. However, you have to understand, it's very difficult to say, in this watershed, this silt came from this place only, and stopped. I mean, we have water that goes from the city of Portage to the county, to Valparaiso, back to the county. I mean, this is not isolated systems. This is not the individual piping of your water lines in your home. This is the same as a giant sewer system, except all of it is not encased in pipes. And so there really is there's jurisdictional boundaries because of course we have them for local municipalities and governments and counties. But in all reality, if you take the county as a whole, the stormwater system is inclusive of everything from stem to stern. And until the entirety of that system is repaired, as you would have to in a sewer type of situation, we're going to continue to have these issues. And we have, as we've discussed ad nauseum here, our stormwater department is not exactly decades old at this point in time. Not only that, it hasn't been funded at the rate it's been funded at now for decades. The cities and towns maybe were a little quicker to it, but we have several conservancy districts that have been in existence for much longer that haven't been able to keep up with their individual jurisdictions either. So this is a very complex problem, and 20 years ago, planning and stormwater started, planning at the Planning Commission started with roads and access and where lot placement was, and then 20 years later, in all honesty, stormwater has come to the very front. How do I get stormwater done on this site the most effective way? And then I start going into where my roads and where my lots go. So we are in that significant change on stormwater that until all of that kind of comes together, it becomes very difficult. There may be this ditch or this stream or that stream that's a little bit easier to ascertain. But we have areas, even the Portage project, it comes down south, it comes from us, goes back in the city, comes back to us, and then back to the city. I mean, it's difficult to say that's your silt. And then the other issue is that each individual jurisdiction has control over their ordinances as far as release rate. The only consistency probably is with the MS4 permitting as it relates to, silt fencing and things like that. But, this is not a area in which there's 50 or 60 years of experience that have been put into it. It's been around, but it's become so much more the focal point. So it's a very complex issue and difficult to say that stream only came from you and it came to here and damaged me. That's exceedingly difficult in a court of law. And that's why ultimately everyone developing their stormwater departments and their fees or their ad valorem and every entity taking care of the jurisdiction in which they have taken on, that's the quickest way to get to a stormwater fix, as opposed to trying to say, well, we think that came out of Chesterton before it went to the county, before it went in through Valparaiso, before it came to us and silted up this pond over here. That's exceedingly difficult. But ultimately, that's what has to be completely built out.
Another question. I don't want to take too much more of your time here, but basically, we're looking at fix-up for subdivisions that basically been around for a long, long time. We're looking for money for Charlotte, and we're looking for money South Haven. South Haven is, there's a difference in these subdivisions. South Haven was built by Paul Saylor, if I'm not mistaken, right? Well,
Yeah.
And you're talking Charlotte, that's basically an old Boise Cascade deal. You sold that property to somebody else, but the difference is basically incomes. The income at Charlotte is, the houses are up there. When it comes to South Haven, it's a little different story. The income levels are a lot lower, and they might not be able to afford some of these fix-ups over there. So what kind of contribution is Charlotte making to offset some of the money that's being spent here?
They're paying a user fee.
Pardon?
They're paying a user fee.
And
Oh,
also,
they are?
Yeah,
So
where the
they're-
Valpo Area Lakes District does not pay, you pay a fee, but you pay it to yourself. You don't pay it to us. So since you don't pay it to us, you're not in our district. So that's how that works. And we cannot use money, fee money, we cannot use fee money outside of our district. that's not allowed.
And also, Mr. Novotny, do you happen to know off the top of your head enough to know, to give us an update of what Shorewood is doing for the pond part of this, the lake part of this, or that investment?
Yeah, so that's great. So there's about on the user fee portion of it, there's about 1,000 lots in Shorewood that all pay into that user fee. So they do generate a significant amount of revenue that comes to our stormwater program. We have been working with, to Mr. McClure's point, we have been working with the Shorewood Forest Property Owners Association. They have responsibility for everything below the normal water level of the lake, so taking care of the lake and the dam and their common properties. They will soon be undertaking a multi-million-dollar lake restoration project, a dredging project, to remove the accumulated sediment and debris that has accumulated in the lake over the last 50 years. So they are making significant contribution through their own project to the overall effort within the subdivision.
So in a nutshell, they're probably, I think the number, when they went through plan, and I could be off, but I want to say that was around $3.5 million lake restoration dredging project. They have to build the facility to hold the dredge, et cetera. And then basically the presentation today is the ravines that are causing or part of the sediment getting to the lake. So the homeowners association has taken on dredging the lake to remove that sediment and the vegetation that has come with it. And the sister project is to try to get to the ravine so that we don't cause the sediment to go back in. Back to your point exactly of, is it okay, or the current situation is that the ravines that are under the county's jurisdiction are causing the sediment to go into somebody else's jurisdiction and for the lake. So that's what that's the dual side of that project, which is one of your original points, is that we're trying to accomplish. Shorewood's not coming to the county saying your ravines are causing our sediment and we're going to sue you about it. They're saying, how about you fix your ravines and we'll take on this dredging project at the lake. So that's the total picture of what's happening there.
Basically, I wanted one more question. Thank you for the answers, and I kind of jumped in here impromptu, and these are some of the, because I'm kind of affected by stormwater, I'm kind of interested in the subject, let's put it that way. So, I don't know if I want to represent, as far as Valley LACD is concerned, we have a county road that runs through us. It's called.
Sir, we're not really here to talk about VLACD right now. They are at the meeting next week, and they'll be giving their presentations on their ask.
No, I'm talking about county roads.
Well, this really we're here to talk about the projects that are on ARPA. The county roads are not on ARPA. They're not. I mean, we're here to talk about the things that are on the agenda today. That's not on the agenda. There's other meetings, commissioner meetings and things that can take care of that type of stuff, so. We're just trying to keep the time and everybody moving.
I understand.
Yeah.
I had a question regarding something. I'll bring it up Monday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, come on forward, name and address.
Come on
Use
down.
this thing?
Yep, sure.
So my name's Eric Bird. I live at 103 Dunes Forest Trail in Porter. I just wanted to say, thank you for this process. I know that this is a lot for all of you to do, reviewing proposals, and it's a great way to get people involved and make sure that, important projects are getting done. But also thank you to Mike for your partnership, and all those projects look really great. I've sat through a lot of different areas and counties, stormwater meetings and things. I applaud you guys on bringing in the green infrastructure and thinking about the future. What you were just talking about in the collaboration and working with other people. If there's ever, obviously I work for Shirley Hines as well, if there's ever ways we can help with that green infrastructure part and the biodiversity part and things, I'm happy to help. I just wanted to say that I very much appreciated this process, and I appreciate your Stormwater Board and the work that you guys do, so thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All three? Your turn. Here we go.
Stand this one?
Yeah, either one.
Okay. I'm just gonna scoot your big old pile, if that's okay. So I can ask questions from just all of the, not just the stormwater, correct? Just from everything?
Yeah,
Okay, I
that's
just
for
wanted
public
to
for
make sure.
everything, yeah, because
Okay.
we didn't open a public comment for those specifically, so, yeah, it's all
Okay,
open.
so I'll start with the stormwater, because, wow, thank you so much. That's a lot of information, and I'm learning a lot. First question, I guess, you know, you were talking about Portage, the Willow Creek, and everything else going in with them. Now, they get their own funding, correct? Like the city, right? Mm-hmm. So how come they come to Valpo, to like a county, to ask us for more money to match theirs? I mean.
Yeah, I'll take the first stab at that. So we talked a little bit about these interjurisdictional issues, right?
Right,
So
right.
watersheds, the drainage areas, they don't stay within municipal boundaries. So this particular project, there's a significant amount of drainage that comes from unincorporated Porter County that's contributing to the problem that happens to be within the city of Portage.
Okay.
So the city's made an effort and put forth an effort to design work, you know, they do land acquisition. We built a partnership, and they said, hey, can you guys contribute, help us out, because you have all this water coming from the county to this problem spot. So, you know, the board, the county considered that, we agreed, and we've been working with the city toward a solution for some time now on this issue. And
So they're putting forth a bunch of their money as well?
correct, they already have.
Is it going to be more, you know, from them than from us?
So the agreement the partnership we developed resulted in an agreement with the city. The city agreed to pay for design and engineering, and then land acquisition for the project. The county agreed to pay for construction and management of the construction contract. So that's how that agreement was struck. So they won't be contributing additional construction dollars. Sort of the onus is on the county now to come through on that agreement we struck with them.
Okay.
And ultimately, the agreement is set up in principle to be about a 50-50 division between the design, property
Correct.
acquisition, and the construction.
And that happens to match roughly how much runoff comes from those portions of the drainage area in the city and those portions of the drainage area in the county.
Okay. Your high priorities, your next important high priority project, is it going to be the South Haven, or is it going to be the Sherwood Forest?
So we selected those two areas as the next top priorities at the same time.
Okay.
Because of the age of the infrastructure within, the amount of people that are affected by the infrastructure and the failing infrastructure they're in. So we, over the last couple of years, we've been working on a study, which is just about, both of them are just about complete, that document all of the infrastructure, the condition, and what needs to be done within. So they're on really concurrent tracks, because if you see the age of the development, they're both started being built around the early 1970s.
Okay.
And so that corrugated metal pipe is rusting away, it's causing problems, so they really need to be addressed sort of concurrently.
I have a question, Commissioner Good. Salt Creek Commons, you had said something about, like, going into Salt Creek Common, about like working, why can't, like, the county go into it? I mean, did I misunderstand something? Maybe I did. I don't know, maybe I did. I just thought, I was like, wow, maybe that's something.
Salt Creek, you can't.
Salt Creek.
Salt Creek itself.
Yes.
The Salt Creek tributary,
Oh, there's a tributary. I didn't know what that was.
that's where we release the water into, it's like a ditch.
Okay.
But it's Salt Creek, it's a creek, but it's a protected tributary
okay.
because of salmon. So the federal government rides herd over it. There's only certain times a year you can work in it, and if they let you work in it, it's very limited what you can do.
And even more, maybe more importantly, there's environmental regulations that apply to all our work. But we have a system, I mentioned that 500-plus miles of infrastructure we're responsible for. We have easements over that infrastructure that allows us the land rights to be able to go in and do work. In the case of Salt Creek and a lot of tributary streams around the county, we don't have those land rights. We don't have easements. So we would have to get the land rights from the property owners to be able to do them. And most don't really want the government necessarily coming onto their property and doing things. So it can be a lengthy negotiation process, but that's.
Glad you answered that, because I had no idea when you said it. I was like, what is he talking about? Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, so that's all I had for that part. The land trust at Shirley Hines Land Trust, is any of that part of the Marquette Trail? Because I know that there was all the preservation and whatnot.
Yeah, no, it's
So
not.
none of that has anything, okay, just curious on that.
Not this request.
What's that?
Not this request
Oh,
that
okay.
they presented today.
On the Porter County corner, I was really, really sad and disappointed that there's really nothing that we can do for the morgue. I mean, I know, it's a thing about finding land and finding a building.
You talked about.
I'm sorry, what?
Commissioner Good talked about that they're looking at a bond system that's going to be up next year.
In the next 18 months.
It just seemed
Right.
like it was kind of, I mean, this is just my opinion, it just seemed like it wasn't as important.
It's very
as-
important.
Oh, I definitely agree, and that's why I'm
Right.
bringing it to you.
It just don't really fit this board. That was my opinion, is it, one of our guidelines was to not add costs for the county and ongoing costs. So obviously, a new building would require maintenance, insurance, and everything else. And that was my opinion. I 100% agree that it sounds like she needs one at some point, but.
And I agreed with that point, but when you guys say, not to bring new revenue, not to, build new things, what about working on projects that are 20 years old? That kind of takes me takes me back. I'm like, wait,
They're failed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
they
in the
don't
long
even
And
work.
so, I mean, I don't know, that just kind of bothers me.
Yeah,
It's
in the long
like,
run, that
we
would
can
save
work
the
on
county money,
old
though.
projects, but you can't, figure a way to, do something for them, I guess. And let me see, one last thing I think I might have, oh, yes, for the, why should COVID money go for upgrading fences and blacktop and electrical grid? This was all at the Porter County Fairgrounds.
Well, in my opinion, over the years, we've had people, at least one person actually electrocuted out at Porter County Fairgrounds. And I could even give you the gentleman's name. He was hospitalized. This electrical upgrade that they're doing is very important. It's a big safety aspect also. And you're talking about children, families, their animals, all being out there. And we want it to be a safe place. And I think it was explained that the Fairgrounds does have their agriculture association, but we have taken part in keeping their upgrade on it. It is part of our.
But this is supposed to be for the COVID money.
Well, I think
mean,
the
whole
COVID
point
fund's
was-
current, but it also allows you to look forward in case there's upcoming pandemics or other situations, and I believe COVID funding could utilize, even though it's consistent, there's also the concept of further pandemics, or how do you address public health if those situations happen again? And I believe the situation in the county, they did the vaccinations out there, they did other things out there, so that.
Absolutely. We've used the building out there for the past 2 years, giving, they were one of the first places that we set up for vaccinations and so
Jury
I can
jury
understand
selection.
was highly
that
involved.
building, But I
Jury
just
selection.
don't understand the extra amount of.
Well, it
money
passes
for
the muster,
fences and the
right?
blacktop
Yes.
and
It
all the
passes the muster, so.
Well, the blacktop's being done because that's where the electric's going into, so they have to redo the blacktop. It's not just to do the blacktop, is my understanding.
And was there a loss of revenue? What did they say? Because I'm sorry, I've listened to a lot of meetings. Did they say that there was a big loss of revenue?
Of course there was.
Yes.
Of course there was.
Yes.
There was a loss of revenue.
Due to COVID?
Of course.
Because they didn't have the fair in 2020,
Didn't have
correct?
fair, didn't
Didn't
have
have
events,
the fair, didn't have events, didn't have weddings, didn't have,
And at the same time, the county was utilizing as much of the buildings for whatever was needed for the pandemic. Again, whether it was the courts and jury selection, or testing, or vaccination, or storing of supplies that were coming in that need to be redistributed, that ended up kind of being the utility space that doesn't exist anywhere else, that you could do drive-through, it's warmed, so yeah, it was, not only was the events canceled, but then we were utilizing
well, the health department was out there for pretty much a year and a half.
that space to whatever we needed at the time. It always is changing, but that was the utility space. And I think that was some of the presentation is that became clear that whatever happens, whether it's a natural disaster or a pandemic, that's our utility space that we would utilize for, whether it's putting all the brush out from a tornado or whatever it would be, or a warming station, or something for like pandemic. Knock on wood, we never go through that again type of situation, but that ends up being that utility space.
I mean, I appreciate you guys explaining it further, because the way that it sounded when it was being proposed was more for fixing up, and then, I mean, there was the mention of, yeah, we use a building for, you know, the testing and the nurses, you know, to come in and whatnot, so I appreciate, you know, the further explanations and whatnot, I really do, because, I mean, it does help to understand more, so, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, we're gonna take another bite at the. Oh, you done? All right, well, with that, then, this.
Can I just say one
Yes.
real quick thing? Board or committee, I will not be at your Tuesday meeting. I have another commitment, but I just want to mention to you that, like today's meeting, you're going to hear water and wetland and stormwater type projects, which are clearly covered in the final rule. But you'll also hear a few building projects. And there may be some questions, why did you get assigned at least one of the projects? And there was no exact science to which group heard which project, but I was just guided by why the commissioners formed each subcommittee. So if it was a building type of a project, it came here with one exception, because that was more like COVID related. So I'm just saying that in case you're wondering, well, why are we hearing this? But
Nope, we get it. It's brand new
and it
for
does
you,
begin
too.
at 5 PM. There was a little bit of confusion, but it's 5 PM. and
It
you
is
have
5 PM.
And you have
It is
a
5
big
PM.
agenda.
Yep.
We do.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Public hearing is closed.